Cocaine, no worse than whiskey, would be sold like wine if legalized worldwide, Colombia's president says. Cocaine is no worse than whiskey. It is only illegal because it comes from Latin America, said Colombian President Gustavo Petro during a live broadcast of a government meeting. Colombia is the world's biggest cocaine producer and exporter, mainly to the United States and Europe, and has spent decades fighting against drug trafficking. During a 6-hour ministerial meeting, broadcast live for the first time ever, the leftist president said cocaine is illegal because it is made from Latin America, not because it is worse than whiskey. Scientists have analyzed this. Cocaine is no worse than whiskey, he added, suggesting that a global cocaine industry could be easily dismantled if the drug were legalized worldwide. If you want peace, you have to dismantle the business of drug trafficking, he said. It could easily be dismantled if they legalized cocaine in the world. It would be sold like wine. Petro also pointed out that fentanyl is killing Americans and is not made in Colombia, referring to the opioid responsible for 75,000 deaths in the United States each year, according to official data. I am going to add Alex as a co-host here because he has joined us, and that is how we are starting this this show. Because in this Trumpian revolution, maybe cocaine will finally become legal, and we can all give in into just a nice, sweet little taste of that yayo. Alex, come on and join. There you are, sir. Sir, how was your week? Oh dear.
Okay. The technology appears to have operated itself.
Okay.
Right. It's becoming autonomous.
That's good. That's actually, well, it's good if it cooperates. Did you align it correctly? Oh, geez. Now he's a listener again. Since coming to power in 2022, Petro has attempted to make peace with all the armed groups that are fueled by drug trafficking in the hope of ending 6 decades of conflict. Let's try to get Alex back on here. Cocaine production in Colombia reached a record high in 2023, jumping 53% to 26,000 tons, according to that is a lot of cocaine. Alex, you're back.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
I can. Yes, I can.
Okay, let's hope this works. Well, I guess we're gonna keep this one short since this week has not been that dumb.
It's been pretty dumb. There's been a lot of dumb.
Oh no.
It's been very strange this week. Let's just put it that way. But
being a connoisseur of dumb, what kind of notes did you pick up this week?
I mean, you have people freaking out over Iraqi Sesame Street being canceled.
I mean, that's a pretty big deal in Iraq.
It's a number one show as far as I understand. It's the only show I know of in Iraq, actually. So,
it's famous worldwide now.
So, I started off with this article about the Colombian president surprise wanting to legalize cocaine worldwide, which I'm personally for, but I don't think that's going to actually happen. I don't see
it. Before we proceed, can we get some feedback on how your audio is? Because I'm getting it. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like it's not exactly overdriven, though. That's probably the closest I can describe it as.
Well, I can lower it by some decibels, and you can tell me if it's better, or if it just sounds lower, overdriven.
The thing is, I also hear it different when I'm as speaker and when I'm not as host and when I'm not. But okay, keep going. I'll tell you if
okay
there's any issues.
Okay, so Alex, yay or nay? Legalize cocaine worldwide so that the Colombian president can have his wine industry equivalent.
Look, I'm gonna slip into my Whitney Webb costume here and say that this is all part of a large conspiracy.
Okay.
It all started when. Do you know what Elon Musk's most popular tweet is?
I do not.
It's I believe, at least last time I checked, it was, next I'm going to buy Coke and put the cocaine back.
Ah, yes, yes.
But of course, you can't do that without legislative authority. So, obviously, if you took him literally on that, you could sort of predict the trajectory of the next few years. It's obvious. It's all coming together. Palantir, Colombia, Trump. It's all part of the plan. Trust the plan.
Well, that is a very fascinating plan. All of this was just to legalize cocaine again. That's pretty good. I like that.
It's just conservatism applied. You just want to go back to how things were in the 20s, specifically the coke.
Well, I mean, we have to bring zoot suits back. They had a little bit of a reprisal in the 90s, but that was only like a fleeting moment for like a year or so. So we have to actually have a roaring 20s here. So let's bring zoot suits back for the second half and cocaine.
Maybe there was a causal relationship. Just saying. Maybe the Colombian president can tell something.
Now, last week you gave a history of Iran-Contra that was off the top of your head, and you told me that you had made some mistakes and that you wanted a chance to correct.
The
story of Iran-Contra that you told.
Yeah. So basically, what I said is that they gave money to they gave money to the Contras to what was it? Anyway, the point is that the end point of the drugs was in Nicaragua. In actuality, it's worse, because what was actually happening is that the CIA was turning a blind eye to Contras linked drug dealers selling drugs in the United States. So back in
any of it cocaine?
I believe a substantial amount of it. Yes. Crack though, crack cocaine to be precise. So this is, if you want, there's this movie called Kill the Messenger, which is pretty tragic and like very sort of familiar to anybody who's lived the last few years, but it happened in the mid-90s when a random journalist kind of like ran into this story pretty much by accident. And he was working for like some random newspaper. I believe it was a San Jose Mercury News or something like that. San Jose Mercury. And basically the other newspapers stepped in to destroy him. Like they worked with their intelligence connections to drive the story that, he got the story wrong, and he's a fuck up, and they dug into his past. It's wild. He also was found to have committed suicide a few years later. Make of that what you will. But that movie is like a definite must watch. But basically, so the connection between the Israeli-Iranian weapons trade and the money coming in and going to the Contras, I don't think that there's a strong connection between that and the Contras being allowed to sell, being turned a blind eye to selling cocaine in the U.S. But the connection is thematic, right? The CIA clearly wanted those guys funded and couldn't fund them officially. So, there were at least, two very illicit channels of getting the money.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you had the opportunity to correct that story. Unfortunately, if people didn't tune in last week, they won't know why you're correcting it or what it involved, like what it was tangential to. So,
Bill, watch Kill the Messenger. Seriously, do not skip it. It's must watch. Anyway, all right.
So we're going to get started on some of the dumb stuff this week, and we're going to start with Sidney Blumenthal talking about Doge.
Well, it would be one thing if we had some disinterested, impartial, objective business person, highly successful, looking at ways to make our government more efficient and save money. That's not what's happening here. Elon Musk is doing a power grab and an information heist, the biggest in American history. and probably the most detrimental financially to American taxpayers. And what we will do is not only expose it, but also try to mobilize the American people so that Elon Musk is stopped from this power grab and information heist and the theft of information that is to the detriment of American taxpayers. He is stealing not just information, he's stealing taxpayer dollars.
He's stealing taxpayer dollars and information. He's just stealing the information. How is he stealing the information? Well, that's to be determined, but he is stealing it. We know that much.
Yep. I mean, I was just saying, like, the next thing he should go into is the DMV just to make the Democrats defend it. That'll be fun. But like, this is, I mean, you know, I've been inundated with like Doge like information in the last week, and I've looked around, and you know, I've also like tried to correct a few of the claims that have been made that aren't quite right. But this narrative appears to be entirely fact free, right? They keep saying like Musk is going in with his acolytes and tapping into your data. Like there was a massive breach of like, what was it, like millions and millions, let's say, of social security numbers months ago, and it just went by, and now we're just basically making things up about what's happening to people's data because there's like the equivalent of an audit happening. That's kind of wild. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, we have the Politico saying that Doge's access to federal data is an absolute nightmare. Legal experts warn. Elon Musk's headlong rush to take control of crucial federal agencies and functions and to dismantle some of them virtually overnight has stoked widespread alarm in Washington about the aims of his Donald Trump-backed mission. The opaque office's early moves have violated the Privacy Act and cybersecurity laws, according to legal experts, and triggered a lawsuit challenging the Trump administration's assault on government bureaucracy. Legal and security experts are particularly exercised by Musk's move to shutter the U.S. Agency for International Development and to take control of the Treasury Department's central payment database. The scale here is unprecedented in terms of the risk to sensitive personal and financial information, said Alan Butler of the Electronic Privacy Information Center. It's an absolute nightmare. The Musk-led effort to gain entry into the Treasury's huge payment database drew a lawsuit Monday from two major federal employee unions and left some lawyers who specialize in regulation of such data nearly apoplectic. Mary Ellen Callahan, former chief privacy officer at the Department of Homeland Security, called Doge's access a data breach of exponential proportion. If we lose control of that data, we've lost control forever, she said. The suit filed in federal court in Washington on Monday by the American Federation of Government Employees and the Service Employees International Union argues that the Trump administration is breaching the Privacy Act of 1974 by sharing payment information with members of the Doge team. Other lawyers said Doge's access could also violate cybersecurity-related laws like the Federal Information Security Modernization Act of 2002. Reports that career employees at the Office of Personnel Management were locked out of key databases by Doge personnel also triggered deep concern Monday among legal and security experts. A key OPM database was breached by hackers in 2013, prompting widespread outrage from lawmakers and federal workers. The U.S. government blamed the hack on China and said the data could be used to target or enlist federal employees in espionage. They're not following the law. They're not following any semblance of best practices. They're just hacking and slashing government IT systems in a way that threatens national security and puts everyone at risk, Butler said. Claims by Musk that he is shutting down USAID were met with widespread skepticism as well. USAID was created through an executive order issued by President John F. Kennedy in 1961, but it is formally established as a federal government agency by Congress in 1998, creating doubts about Trump's authority to simply abolish it, or as Secretary of State Marco Rubio has suggested, fold it into the State Department. So it's a big data heist, and it's illegal, and it needs to stop right away, Alex, right away, or we'll never get it back.
Good. I don't know. It's, you know, okay, we are both, you know, technologists. We built a couple of systems in our, you know, in our lives. And we can probably imagine, you know, well, with a lot more detail than the average pundit, let's put it this way, what's going on there, right? Like, you literally have people tapping into, you know, various distributed databases that are like all over the place. trying to like pull together and cross-check the data, and running SQL queries, right? I don't know if you have any different understanding. I've been trying to the problem is that I'm open to criticisms, right? Of this, I'm actually concerned specifically about what happens if they succeed at making the government a lot more efficient, right? So I am open to criticism, but when I read articles like the one that you showed this week, that you just read, which there's a lot of, right? You just are waiting for the there, and there's like nothing. It's all wording, right? Oh, Musk is infiltrating. He's, like, okay, but like these are just characterizations. Like you could also say the reorganized U.S. Data service is cross-checking, data across various branches of the executive branch, as instructed by the president, who, by the way, has broad authority to provide security clearances and to declassify shit. So, is every I and T of the law sort of dotted and crossed? I don't know, but like the broad spirit is the president has control of the information of the executive branch, and he can authorize people to do stuff with it. So I don't, Again, I'm open to somebody saying like, no, this is why this is a problem, but I haven't heard it yet. Like in terms of the short-term problem, the long-term problem I see, though nobody seems to be talking about it. The short-term problem is what I don't see.
So yeah, I mean, it depends on how the data, I guess, is being analyzed. So you can do an analysis that does not store the data. You can sort of download and perform an analysis where let's say you're categorizing, or you're summing, or you're running reports, or you're doing a graph, the graph databases that you've seen, or the graphs that you've seen floating around, where you're just connecting accounts to each other, without actually storing the data. To store the data would require a large amount of transfer that probably could be monitored by other departments to see that amount of data was being transferred through a network, and therefore wind up in one of those news articles talking about the terabytes of data that was being transferred to some third-party host. If it wasn't going to be a third-party host, you'd have to actually bring a separate system there to get the data, and I don't believe that you're talking about the volume of data that you would be concerned about just transferring onto SD cards or something, right?
There, though, keep in mind, right, that the U.S. government has GovCloud and Amazon, and I'm sure they have similar deals with a lot of other data center providers. So, there must be some enclave, which is like, quote unquote, whatever, the executive, and they can bring up machines on demand, right? Like, it's not like it has to be in situ.
And so then the idea would be, okay, if let's say it's all cloud hosted, it would be more difficult to monitor specific traffic, cloud-based, particularly if you were transferring it through private networks in the cloud. But if we're alleging that, let's say, Tesla has or xAI has opened up its own cloud feeds and is now transferring through a private network VPN connection in the cloud directly from one data source to another, and literally stealing the data, I'm going to want to see that hard accusation in writing by a person who's named. I want to see that. Because I could understand that if a person didn't have proper authorization, that there's certain sensitive information, PII, primary identifiable information, that is sensitive and you don't want people to just willy-nilly have access to. That's understandable. But if every single one of these people was given authorization through the proper channels, then they were given authorization through the proper channels. And whether or not the government should have this at all accessible to people, I mean, I kind of find it funny because the NSA has access to pretty much all of the data that travels through the internet, and has the ability to read your fucking emails at any point in time. And James Clapper's sitting there pretending that they don't do that when they actually do. And this is apparently a bigger concern for them than that still being possible.
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly right. There's no, from what I've seen, the entire sort of panic is manufactured on the basis of doing sort of some sort of equivocation between Musk being involved, and therefore, the data is like assumed to be exiting, the enclave of the U.S. government, which I've seen. I mean, minus zero evidence of. There's nothing. And honestly, like that's the thing. I think the fundamental problem these people have is that they're assuming that Musk is incompetent. Which, I mean, if you spend 5 minutes thinking about it, and you're like, yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's doing with technology. Like that's the problem. You must have been dropped on your head as a child. I don't know how you make that thought stick in your head. Just like think he started PayPal. Like whatever. Like we can get into it whether he's the founder or not. Like he was the largest individual shareholder in PayPal, right? And then he's moved on to other more like real world stuff. Like it's not. That's not where you expect the problem to be. That he doesn't know what he's doing with cybersecurity. Like
let me say that I'm not gonna pretend that Elon Musk, and I'm not saying you are, but I'm not gonna pretend that Elon Musk is infallible or give him a Hummer and say that he's the biggest tech genius in the world. He can be a goofball. He can go by the seat of his pants and he can fuck up. That's
Absolutely.
human, and so it's not like a huge indictment on the guy. And I'm not saying that he has fucked up anything here. The one legitimate concern is far less than what they're talking about here, where he's stealing all the data. But one legitimate concern is he now is a business person with exclusive access to investigate a government problem, where he will have proprietary knowledge that no other possible competitor could have, in order to offer solutions to the government for certain problems. Mm-hmm. That is a risk that is people might not want, because you want competitive marketplaces. If you're going to have the government partnering up with private business, you want it to be an open competition. You don't want exclusivity necessarily. Right. And so that could be a problem, because now he has a team, all his people, right?
Yep.
Going in, analyzing a situation, basically doing what any good business-to-business solutions provider would be doing, which is trying to understand the scope of the problem, and if you're going to provide custom solutions, going in providing custom solutions to that. Now, he has exclusive access to that, and if they don't publish everything that they discovered about the process, he can have proprietary information and beat competitors day in and day out in perpetuity.
There's only one very small wrinkle. Sorry, continue, and I'll.
That was the thought. That was the end.
So there's one tiny wrinkle, right? So the vast majority of the money that goes to Musk from the U.S. government is for SpaceX, okay, doing launches and stuff, particularly to the ISS and launching satellites for satellite internet and stuff like that. The very, very tiny wrinkle is that the U.S. government was dead set on creating competition for SpaceX, especially for the ISS, right? The result of that is that we have two astronauts stranded, and SpaceX was, sent to fetch them. So the dominance of SpaceX in that particular industry is absolute. They are both the highest quality and the lowest cost provider. So, we need a little bit more of a theory of the case of what he's getting. Is he going to find the secrets of Boeing about how to not succeed with double the money and with double the time and fail? I
want to point out that stranded is now in quotes. Okay, so don't just go throwing around stranded willy-nilly here.
The only thing I remember is that SpaceX was trying to finish their new capsule, the new Dragon capsule, to get them. And that was taking a bit longer, and that was going to go into April. And NASA basically pushed SpaceX to reuse a prior one that they have ready to go, because if it was pushed into April, apparently the amount of provisions on the space station is going to go to red, like low, basically, right? Like we're talking about food and stuff like that. So I don't know if they're stranded or not, but Starving on the ISS does not sound fun to me.
Do you have any concern that that Elon Musk is going to push the U.S. Treasury to use the Doge standard to back the currency?
Oh no, not the Doge standard. It will
Not
be
a
a step
soft
up, to
gold
be
standard.
completely honest with you. To be completely honest with you, it will be a step up. But no, it's really, really frustrating because again, there can be real concerns, right, with this whole effort. I do think that on balance, it's definitely worth letting play out. But like, I can see where a critic would come from, and I can see where these guys are coming from, and those two places are entirely different. That's my problem. Like they're alleging shit that they provide zero evidence for, and there is a zero evidence for. Because it would be really surprising if it were happening, and they're not offering any evidence whatsoever. But they are, the kinds of things they're saying are sort of what it's like wish casting. It's like, wouldn't it be nice if that was true kind of thing? It's not, sort of, oh my God, we just discovered this and here's how.
That is a sentence or an expression missing from these articles, which is always what articles include when they want to discount the idea. It's that the accuser is saying it without evidence. And none of these articles have the accusers, juxtaposed with they said without evidence.
There is no evidence to right. Where's the Snopes fact check for? There is no evidence that Doge has exfiltrated data.
Correct.
For example.
Correct.
Right.
Right. That's missing from those articles.
Yeah, it's probably missing from the internet, to be completely honest with you. And I'm seeing this also on the the dissident side, which has taken to making the wildest sort of. I mean, you've got like 70-year-old boomers sort of having sophisticated takes on permissioning systems at this point, and what the difference between read-write and read-only is, or something which. Again, once you understand like three things about technology, you realize that this person is connecting words with no particular.
Well, do you have like an example? Because you're spending more time in this particular space than I am.
I think now Naomi Wolf is the best one. Should I dig one up just to?
Yeah, please.
Yes, it's not going to be hard. Let me just put it this way.
And then we're going to move on to a couple of some other takes from this. So we're not moving off the subject, but we're moving on to a couple other takes. So there's.
Hey, I asked I approved Skylab, so maybe he can give us his take while I dig up some.
Skylab, what was your thoughts as you raised your hand there?
Well, so if we're going to steelman criticism of Doge and what they're doing particularly with USAID in the last week. I think Jesse Singal is probably the most interesting person to watch right now. And I don't know, who's right and who's wrong, but what he's doing is pushing back against a lot of the claims that dissidents are making, people that I follow, regarding the fraud. Not necessarily everything you're seeing is fraud. It might look like it at first glance, but there could be reasonable explanations. The best example is the political funding. Because what I believe Jesse Singal was saying as a kind of defense of them is that those specialized subscriptions actually had a lot of value to them.
Well, so there's some mixture of topics in that. I mean, I know that you're paraphrasing someone else, so I'm not blaming you necessarily. It could be the Jesse himself is merging topics, but fraud is slightly different than incestuous business relationships. Okay, there's you can call it fraud from the standpoint of what the government's true behavior should be and what the government's true operating procedures should be, but it's not fraud in the same sense of the way that it's being referred to possibly in the Treasury, which is that there's literal money going to fraudsters that is hard to account for and therefore hard to stop because of the ways that they're keeping accounting. It's just sort of they're automatically rubber stamping payouts, and the accountability is way further down the chain, not at the Treasury level. And so the Treasury just has these numbers going out, and the people who they are actually paying could also already be on do not pay lists for being fraudulent, right? So there could be literal fraud in that sense, and then there could be inappropriate relationships or from some sort of ideal inappropriate relationships, whether or not they're legal or in the illegal sense fraudulent.
Gotcha. Well, where do you stand as far as, I mean, is there a reasonable reason why, the U.S. would spend, millions and millions of dollars on 29 subscriptions to Politico?
Absolutely, because if you're going to have people who are going to investigate you, you want to be able to punish them economically.
Yeah, anyway,
if I'm giving you your main kit and caboodle, you're not going to run a report on me that runs me out of town.
By the way, I want to add a little bit of data to that conversation because I kind of went and looked up, and I didn't tweet about it because it didn't seem like a big enough deal. But Politico was sold for like $1 billion or something to Axel Springer a couple of years ago, and we have some revenue numbers. I think they're more recent than that. Where Politico Pro, the particular product that the U.S. government was subscribing to the tune of $8.5 million or whatever it was, Politico Pro was producing half the revenue, which was about $100-something million. So just the U.S. government was 8% of their one of the two primary products.
Have we heard all of the scores of non-government people who are purchasing Politico Pro? Or is it basically an exclusive government product? There are...
The other thing is that any company in the world, right, that has an $8 million outlay to a producer, especially a zero-margin producer like a publisher, would have picked up the phone and said, I'm giving you $8 million. I will now proceed to give you $6 million, and I want 20% more subscriptions. Right? You use your purchasing power to secure better pricing.
And the people who argue
that this has not happened.
Yeah, the people who argue we have to buy in bulk as a government for all medication so that we can get the bulk pricing that the other European countries get would be doing the same behavior if they really cared about that. Now, there are services out there like Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis who do giant data aggregations. So we're talking historical news, court cases across all of the different court systems, amounts of work that the federal government would, if they tried to go and pursue it on their own, would probably take several decades because they'd initiate the plan would get tied up in approvals forever. Then once approved, how it would be delayed and never see the light of day. And by the time it saw the light of day, all the technology would be out of date, and et cetera, et cetera. Those types of purchases for databases that the government does not itself have access to is one possible thing that I could say I could understand legitimate purchases to having access to that data. But when you're talking Politico Pro, if you go to Politico Pro's website where they advertise their service, the first thing they advertise is having access to executive orders. Like things that the government just has there on their own websites. You just go to your own government's website and get them. You don't need a specialized service to give you access to that. Now, you might have paid analysts that someone might find useful, but that's a completely separate thing. Those are opinions and things that are now into question about influence. If you have Politico Pro paying someone to give opinions, that person, let's say, has some connection to the World Economic Foundation or other powerful people, and therefore their opinions are now modified by the powerful interests. And now you have the person in the government who is paying exorbitant amounts of money in order to have exclusive access to the WEF's opinions filtered through this person. It winds up being too complicated to make it any sense of. So there's no benefit that I can see at that level of what Politico Pro would be supplying to the U.S. government outside of generic bullshit that I would disapprove of, whether or not it was not involved in any salacious business relationships. But like Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis would be an example of what I would consider to be understandable services that the government might want access to.
Can I read you that Naomi Wolf tweet now?
Yes, please.
This is just one, not the one, like I've seen several. This one is new to me, but it's, well, you'll see. She says, if I've shared it to the space if people want to check the original. It says, if Musk's engineers plugged their devices into government computers, which news reports assert they did, you can machine read everything, copy it, quote, read only, quote, includes copying, -- and create a mirror data set of everyone and everything on your own servers. Then you can create digital maps and filters.
Okay.
See, the problem is she's an analog maps and filters kind of person. She liked it when it was with, the light bulbs and shit.
Read only is there's a lot of devil in those details, right? So are you talking hard drive read access? Probably not. You are probably talking about a program or a API like SQL, as you mentioned earlier, where you are actually going and just querying a data set, which of course you could do a large volume copy on, but you are going to be restricted in certain ways to how you access that data, and you're not without the evidence that they're copying it to an external system in order to do all that processing, and that external system was not approved, and that it's all it's not on the up and up. There's no there's nothing there yet.
Again, there's very clear use of language here, right? She says they plugged their devices. Okay, when you hear that and you don't know anything, what you understand is the guy took his phone out, put a USB on it, right, and put it onto a government server somewhere, right, and started like siphoning off information, right, like. And she has no evidence for this. There's no, first of all, that would be extremely stupid just to start with, right? For people who know what they're doing. And she has no evidence. So, that's where we start from. And then she says, you can create a mirror data set of everyone and everything on your own servers and stuff. Like, this is all, like hypothetical. Like, it could be happening, and therefore it is happening. Right?
Okay, let's fix this. Let's take away the read.
Not exited the government enclave. Even if all of that was happening, just to be very clear, not only have we not exited the government enclave, we've not exited the executive branch enclave. This is all happening inside the executive branch, and what various court orders are trying to enforce is the intra-departmental, intra-executive branch, intra-government enclaves.
Well, let's take away their read access then and give them write-only access. How about that?
That's very good. That would be amazing.
That solves the problem, right? They won't have to worry about
it. She claims that they can mess with CDC data through this and change the census and whatever. All I'm saying is this person clearly has no idea what she's talking about. Maybe she heard some word somewhere. She's just sticking them together, taking the worst possible interpretation and just assuming it's true.
I invited Jacob up here because we haven't had too many volunteers in the last couple of weeks to offer opinions, so I'm breaking the intended flow of Half Point just because this topic seems to be getting people's attention. So Jacob, what's up, sir?
So if you're a government efficiency nerd like I have been for the past 20 some years, you know that there's so much efficiency possible in the government, and I could bore you to death with all the points here, but one of the things about publishing government information, this has been a thing since forever. The Supreme Court publishing, for example, its court opinions, they picked a publisher who was allowed to have access to their information. That publisher made a lot of money, and supposedly the deal was that the government gets free copies and free services from these publishers. So what ended up happening with advent of computers and internet and all that stuff, right, is the government not only didn't start making things a lot more efficient and easier for itself, for example, just now Supreme Court, but only Supreme Court opinions are available on their website. They started doing things like these political subscriptions where the government is now paying for information that the government gives to the publishers. And so I mean, there's so much efficiency that's available because now we have databases and stuff. And frankly, I love seeing the bureaucrats howl the way they are, like a stuck pig, when they find out, oh, now suddenly we're going to actually use technology to have efficiency in the government. And there's literally trillions of dollars of waste that can be taken out of here. I could go into so much detail.
Well, I have some experience with those. Go ahead, Alex.
I'd love to hear. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm not saying that I have anywhere near comparable the research on the subject that you have, Jacob. But I have my own interactions with government for my own day-to-day life with let's say some of their oversights and some of their actual things they excel at. It is not 100% ubiquitous that every government at every level sucks at providing information online or in a digital format. There's actually troves and troves of data that the government provides you regularly and on schedule that you can have access to. So there are places where they do a great job of that. There are other places where processes that could be updated have not been updated, causing significant billions and I'm sure trillions, if you add it all up, Jacob, of waste that could be cleaned up. I just wanted to say that it's not ubiquitous that they don't provide things publicly. There's so much data available, you get overwhelmed if you were just looking, just sorting through it to browse. So, I mean, there's the fact that Politico, though, is offering them stuff that is already available. I guess they're just arranging it better and pointing it out to them as like, a notification system or a consolidation system. That does not seem to me worth the value. And someone for government who doesn't actually have to pay out of their own pocket does not care what it costs necessarily.
No, you're absolutely right. And yes, there's tons of government. Look, government providing information is really, really important. Anyone who's done historical research, look, if you're in academia and doing research, government data sets are some of the most important information you can possibly get. Government data is incredibly valuable and necessary for our society to function the way it does. What gets frustrating to somebody like me is it took so one of the best things of the ACA was when CMS was forced to make its data public. And we have access to CMS data, that's the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services data, that is wonderful and has made government much more efficient. And frankly, if you're paying attention to this data, if you mine this data, and apparently now they're using AI to mine this data, dude, if you have access to government emails, which the truth is, according to the Freedom of Information Act, most government emails, these are not private things. This is official functions of 2 million government employees. All of their email really should be available, right? But obviously, if you were to make all of that as available as it could easily become now in the days of the internet, 20 years ago, when I was really into this, I was getting a master's of public administration. I saw how the potential for computers and the internet, what incredible potential it has to completely revolutionize how government is run. And it's the special interests, which include the government employees and the bureaucracy, which would lose so much power and there would be transparency and accountability in ways that, frankly, if you're a government employee feels authoritarian, well, guess what? You're the government. that it's what's kept it from happening. And I am so excited about the possibility of Doge doing all of the things that I never imagined would actually happen, because there are these interests that frankly only someone like Elon Musk, who doesn't give a fuck and is willing to use his megaphone on X, can make happen. And when you look at the fact that it's not just young coders that are on Doge. ProPublica found that there were 3 Supreme Court clerks. You don't get to become a Supreme Court clerk unless you're one of the best lawyers in the country. There's 3 of them on the Doge team.
Yeah, and when I heard that, I was actually started watching this very little YouTube channel called Lawfare, which is like basically people from the blob thinking out loud what the fuck to do and sort of following the various lawsuits. And I heard that exact factoid, and I was like, okay, like they're trying to present Doge as if it's like some kind of like fly by night operation where some 20-year-old is like sleeping in a cupboard and like
that's why they're
siphoning off
focusing.
data.
That's why they're focusing on those kids. Well, not kids, the 20-year-olds.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, yeah, not kids, because then you look at how old the founders were, and people like tend to shut the fuck up, or Greta, just to mention another global leader there. Okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like the only thing that matters here is competence and willingness to do the job. And anyway, whatever. That's a whole other story there. They're just like the use of language is such to present it as if Elon shows up with like a few Tesla engineers, that are completely like reckless, right? And they're just kind of like doing whatever comes to their heads, and not realizing that this is a very serious operation that is working extremely hard and is actually reasonably well organized. One little factor that I heard there is when David Sachs spoke at the All In podcast. He's now in the government, right? So he's like in the White House all the time, and he discussed at one point that like he went over to the building where Doge is. It was like late, right? And he just opens the door, and it's like a full room of people, like they're all wearing suits for some reason. Maybe there's a dress code, I'm not sure. Just working late into the night, and apparently this has been a problem for the facilities because this hasn't happened before.
Yeah, I have Antonio Gracias from the All In podcast as a clip. I don't know if that has any of what you just said inside of it.
All I'm saying is like, this is a far more organized and legally well structured operation than people are letting on. And if you are a listener of this program, you knew from last week that Doge is not like some kind of random outfit or whatever. It is a reorganization of the U.S. Data Service, which already has authorization to do a bunch of things, and their head does not require congressional authorization. Like many other officials in the Biden government, all this stuff about like you're unelected and stuff is just absolutely irrelevant bullshit. That like, you can't elect multiple people. You elect like a president and a vice president. That's what you elect. That what does that have to do with anything?
Brett Weinstein on Joe Rogan gave the best analogy I've heard of what's going on when you're watching people like Chuck Schumer and Maxine Waters trying to stop this Doge team. It's like watching dinosaurs who don't realize the comet hit.
It is actually really interesting. That opens up something else, which is that the attack is coming from a dimension that they hadn't considered, right? Usually politicians fight with each other over line items, right? And number and sums. Like nobody thought, or whatever, I'm sure somebody thought it, but like nobody actually went in and said, let's actually see what's actually happening in actual reality. Forget what we, all our wish think. Like what's actually going on here, right? Because politicians might want to cut here and cut there, right? But they ultimately have to depend on, government employees to actually go and implement stuff, right? So let's say you wanted to like make savings on like social services or whatever. without reducing people's benefits, just sort of spend less for them, how are you going to do that as a senator, right? Like you can pass a law that says like you have to make a new office to do this or whatever, right? But like it's going to end up like all the other ones and additional budget. Like without actually going in and having high bandwidth back and forth communication and like very, very granular and chasing down the amounts to their actual destinations, you just can't do this. And it appears that nobody has, and they have even no idea what they're basically talking about. So their only instinct is stop this, right? That's the only thing they can say is stop this. And yeah, I think the Gator, what you picked up, which is that they're making shit up like blatantly. There's not even an attempt to sort of support the corruption allegations that they're making. Has to do with the fact that they just they've been completely caught by surprise and they've got nothing.
Are you supportive of these onesies?
Stop me if this is too data nerdish in terms of government, but the major problem of government budgeting is that the one rule of anyone with a government budget is you have to spend every last dollar that was budgeted or your budget gets cut.
That's a familiar property of corporations too. But you're absolutely right. There is this is one of the chronic things, one of the trends that actually eventually turned up to be the Soviet Union's downfall, which is like you just said, you have a budget. If you don't use your budget completely, then the next year you are allocated pretty much what you had used. And so the fluctuations in your needs year to year aren't necessarily considered, and the budget that you would have gotten gets allocated elsewhere. So you are encouraged to spend everything you have, whether it makes sense to or not, just so that you can get your budget renewed at that same level the next year. In the Soviet Union, it was obviously a more exacerbated version of the same problem, but yeah.
And of course, where are you going to spend that money, right? You're going to spend it on your friends because you don't actually have use for it.
Well, it's not just that. So government, I mean, what the government has been doing for hundreds of years, much of it has been providing databases with ancient things such as actual physical paper and files, etc. Right? Literal paper shuffling in ways that you can't even imagine somebody doing today. And so people point out that the federal government has basically had the same number of people, I believe, since like the 70s. But the fact is that the functions that they're doing now, because we have databases, these new things called computers, the functions have completely changed, and you can do things far, far more efficiently than you could before. But as a legislator, these are important functions to keep on doing, and you can't just slash the budget without going in there, seeing how things are done and how you can make efficiencies. What Doge is doing right now is so important, because what they're doing is they're mapping the territory and seeing, okay, what is actually being done, who's doing what. And that's where you can then finally squeeze the budget and get I believe, trillions of dollars that are available out of here. And that's why the Democrats are losing their mind over the read-only access. Because the whole point is, if you can't map it, if you can't audit it, the Department of Defense has been trying to get an audit for years. I believe they've attempted 7 or 8 audits so far and failed every single one. Because once you map the territory, that's already going to be half the battle, and that's what they're trying to stop.
Yeah, well, let's actually take how some of the people are reacting. This is a clip from Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway on a podcast just the other day.
I want to know, who are these young, highly intelligent, highly motivated zealots following them into these buildings and shutting off payments to schools and Head Starts. I want to know their names.
Well, they're trying to, the local officials are trying to make that official. The newly installed Trump are threatening people for naming their names, just so you know. But go ahead.
Oh yeah, but they can unmask CIA officers who put their lives in harm's way to try and keep our Americans safe. I want to know who their names are, and I want to see Democratic governors saying, I'm going to do everything I can in my power to use the full faith and to the letter of the law to put you folks in prison. I think what you're doing is trespassing. I think this is a coup. And be clear, just because the new insurrectionist who was elected, I don't believe this is legal. And I'm going to hold the people accountable who are trespassing and part of a coup accountable. To just sit back and say this is horrible and this is unlawful, we need to go gangster here and say, look, we are not negotiating around this stuff. This is illegal. This is a coup. This is the unlawful seizure of power. We are not going to engage in these bullshit, ridiculous arguments over, Gaza and Greenland. We are going to hold the people accountable. Here are their names. Here are their faces. And we have contacted the local authorities in where these kids live, these young adults, and we are going to hold them accountable.
And the question is, a lot of them are like, what do we do? They're literally asking me, what do we do to stop him? I was like, I just don't. I was like, you actually don't have the means to do so, because these poor people are in these agencies. And when these idiots come in, these children, these arrogant little pricks come in and say, we're going to call the federal marshals, or the president has ordered you to step aside. They kind of have to, you have to be resistant and be walked out by security. And then security doesn't know which one to listen to, right? Essentially.
I'd like to see whatever it is, 48 or 49 U.S. senators and any Republicans that want to join. I'd like to see a couple hundred members of Congress go to the fucking building where this is and demand to go in. And
so, we're calling the local police where the employees of Doge live to tell them to stop it. Just make them stop this trespassing and coup. Insurrectionist coup that they won legally at the ballot.
They finally got inside.
Oh my God.
They went the long way.
It's a coup because they're exercising authority that they disagree with. And I guess they believe that the system has tried so very hard to make the bureaucracy difficult to change. And therefore they should be given the leeway to make it difficult still, and it's not fair that someone is overriding their difficulty level.
That's precisely it. Actually, one of the main takes, there's this account that I have a pretty adversarial relationship with that's coming from the rationalist sphere called Trace Woodgrains, I think, that before the election said, I don't think the Republicans can put enough competence to keep the administrative state running. So even though I hate a lot of things about the Democrats, I'm going to vote for the machine. Like literally, this was the take, right? And I'm like, I said you're retarded at the time. Now the same person is like, if we're going to forgive, this 20-year-old, 25-year-old, whatever, for his takes, why not we pardon SBF too? Like, so it's like basically, okay, fine, you brought competence, but I didn't want that competence. I wanted some button-down bureaucrat, not like some guy with some edgelord from 4chan or something.
I would say that the concern I have, not necessarily, that there's a concern that you cause too much chaos and you can't really get things running that you might ideally want running. But outside of that, a concern I might have is that you do this, burning of the forest to kill off the dead brush, and you don't set up enough constraints for the next administration or future administrations, so that this is a one-time deal, and once it's done, that's it, and we're going to just have another, several decades of bloating it back up, and people with now motivation to try to replace what was torn down, without putting enough appropriate stopholds to both have a regular sort of inspection process to monitor, let's say, efficiency or find improvements in efficiency, but also clear out waste and potential fraud activity. If you don't have enough in place by the time you leave to try to make sure that the things you've done here are fixed, there is just a very big possibility that the next person, if it's, let's say, not J.D. Vance, and, it's a Democrat with now a mandate to put it all back, that you could wind up not exactly in the same situation you were, but in a direction that leads you back.
Yeah, I guess on one level, right, even if that was the outcome, it would be great, right? Like, if Musk manages to balance the budget, which I think is his ambition. I don't know if I think he said it as much, but I don't think people have really internalized this. But let's say he accomplishes this, right? And like with Clinton, then, it slips again. Okay, but it's better than not doing it. But frankly, I think given the juncture we're in right now, a lot of this has endgame dynamics. What I mean by this is, if things continue on a roughly, linear path from where we are, in 10 years, there's very little chance you won't be able to have an AI brain that's going to be able to just, chomp down the entirety of the executive branch and just tell you this is waste. It's just a straight line from where we are. So I think a lot of what's happening right now is about getting through the next 3 or 4 years without imploding, right? I could totally believe, for example, that the prior administration has basically set up the financial system and the finance of the government to blow. And basically part of what they're trying to do is to reverse, they were expecting a certain amount of agility from the new administration, and this administration is showing up with 20x that agility, which means that they will actually be able to reverse a bunch of stuff, in time. So, I think if the U.S. gets through the next, 4, definitely 8 years, you're in a completely different world on the other side of that.
You are correct. I agree with you in the extent of, if they can make it at least a decade of sort of this standard. The reason being that there is a lock-in expectation that future generations have, where whatever environment they are growing up into is the way that things are, and that's their expectation. So right now, the Department of Education, for example, is something that most conservatives and libertarians are totally happy to just get rid of. It wasn't something that was created 100 or 200 years ago. It was something created in the last 50 years, and has not necessarily been integral to fostering the educational development of the next generation. But when you have a Department of Education that exists, and you are growing into politics, you're becoming a voter, you're understanding the things that are there, and you hear, oh, they're getting rid of the Department of Education, you have that's been there, that's needed, that's necessary for the functioning of the government. So if you get rid of it, and you don't have a long enough time for people to become into the voting population as youth and not have it, and see the effects of not having it, and see how the world without it is fine, then you have the we need it back syndrome. If it's too short, well, we need to get it back in the next term. So if J.D. Vance can, let's say, become president in 4 years and keep a Department of Education gone, should it be something that gets nixed in this term, and then perhaps win a second term and keep it gone, then you have 12 years of it not really existing and not mattering. And that's a large segment of time for it to be realized by the voting populace that it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, I think this is where my hypothesis that the Democrats don't have an ideology problem, they have a paradigm problem comes in. Because I genuinely think, and I mean, you see the reactions, they're not coherent, they're not actually putting any message together. It's all just stop, don't, you're hurting me, kind of reactions. That I think that until they are able to actually refactor themselves, they won't be able to put together a coherent proposition. Shit happens, right, all the time. So this could totally go sideways. I don't have any certainty whatsoever. I'm just saying, like, on the very broad strokes, I don't see the Democrats putting themselves in a position where they can put together an offering that will be attractive given what's happening. And here's the other thing, right? I mean, Musk is brilliant in this regard, and this was part of their plan, obviously. He's got the news generating machine, right? Like, like government usually tries to operate in secret, and reacts to the headlines. This is completely different. Like, at any given moment, if he's like cornered somewhere, like you'll see another release of like another like few billion in fraud, and everybody will have to cover that, right? And it just keeps going. That it's I don't think we've ever had anything like that.
Oh no. Musk's purchase of Twitter, if he knew that this was going to be his trajectory, was an insanely good strategic move from being able to control, at least having access to a platform that gives him the ability to get a message out at any point in time that he wants. Maybe he didn't foresee being in this position because maybe that was too far ahead and he hadn't been in contact with Trump to say that he was going to align with him and then be part of this. Maybe that all just evolved organically after the fact. But when, while I didn't think that he was going to purchase Twitter for the price that it was, I thought that he was going to back out simply because of the cost. Not that he didn't want to buy it, but that it was at $44 billion, it was just too much. When he was, I guess, sort of forced to buy it, whatever. The reason behind buying it was one of the same reasons that Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post, because you have access to that distribution, that news distribution, whether you want to call it propaganda or not. You are now a propagandist. You now have access to the spigot, the water, the water hose that provides the water to the populace.
The difference between Musk and every other sort of person on that stratum is that he goes in himself head first, right? Like if Bezos had done something similar, right, you would not be seeing him personally being appointed to head the appropriate service of the executive, right? It will be some cutout with arm's length whatevers, right? And it wouldn't be that he is, the analogy here is Musk is the Washington Post's top columnist, right? He's literally the most followed account on here. He's putting his face on stuff. And I think that's also both a huge weakness and a strength, but like, it is very, very different because like, it's one thing to say like, I got my paid propagandist to do my propaganda for me. And it's another thing to say like, I'm tweeting from my personal account what my thoughts are.
No, I agree.
Right. It's like,
yeah, I agree. I'm going to play two more clips on this subject to round it out here. So this was from the All In podcast. This was Antonio Gracias.
The way the government works, a department just basically asks for money from Treasury and they send it out. We all run businesses. There's a reconciliation process. You have a contract, you issue a PO against it, something comes in, you check that it came in, service is rendered, and then you issue a payable, and then a month later you pay it, right? That doesn't happen in the U.S. government. There is that process is broken. It used to happen. It's broken now. And so literally money's flowing out. I used to ask myself this question: why are the numbers always revised? Why are they always wrong? How can the government know how much money it's spending? Just hit the button on the computer and figure it out. Problem is that button doesn't exist. We spent time early on. I was at Mar-a-Lago, Elon, trying to track through like, how does the money actually flow? No one could tell us how it actually flows. Where is it going out? People didn't know. And it's totally crazy. And it's the reason
you all go through Treasury, Antonio, or like, can you just explain that to us?
Well, so I will try to explain it to you. I'm not sure I have full command of it. I'm not sure anyone does quite yet. It goes to Treasury ultimately, but it was supposed to flow through the way it was supposed to work. It was changed in the 70s, in 1973. The Nixon administration in 71, we go back, they came off the gold standard, which allowed deficits. In 73, at the nadir of the Nixon presidency, Congress took away from the presidency the executive power, this thing called apportionments, which was the power of the executive to stop spending. So Nixon was abusing it by stopping things he didn't want, and so Congress took away from him. What that means today is the executive, as he reaches in, it's very hard to just stop payments. So what's happening is the government is put in a process where they would just have an authorized executive kind of stamp a bill that got paid. That broke. And I don't know when it broke, but it broke sometime. So the money flow now, department gets a budget authorized to it by Congress. It goes to OMB. allocates the budget. That department then just sends a money request to Treasury to pay. It is not reconciled against what happened. This is one of the reasons.
Yeah, and that's it. There's no controller. There's no controller function like there is in a normal company.
100%. There is no control. Yeah. There is no controller. There's no reconciliation. The reason they can't pass audits, okay, the reason this happens is because you can't audit something you haven't reconciled. The only audit that I've seen is actually from the Social Security Administration, and when you read it, I've got one of my partners who've read the thing. It's just riddled with material weaknesses. There are probably
there are individuals that have made like millions or billions of dollars from mispayments overseas. Like, is this kind of what's gone on in the missing money in Ukraine? Do you think? Like, it's kind of found its way to the wrong places?
Yeah, I mean, so what I don't know what happened in Ukraine.
Such a crazy story.
Yeah, it is shocking about Ukraine. I will say that I have business experience trying to work in businesses that had Medicaid and Medicare's payments. I wanted to make that better, right? We used to make the world better, and we just stopped because we found so much fraud. I mean, I'm certain we literally have a rule here: government payor in those areas. If it's more than like a third of the business, we don't do it. And in the services space, this is why we found.
So, Skylab, to go back to your point with Jesse Singal, so that would be a situation that he's describing there, where fraud could be discovered rampantly because you are making payments without really accounting for the need for the payment, for whether or not the payee is worthy of the payment, et cetera, et cetera. So the lack of accounting ability in there is absolutely a place where fraud could be uncovered in mass if things were reconciled appropriately. That is a different type of fraud than just let's say incestuous relationships between the media and the government.
There's a very easy way to understand for people who might not, because I run a business. I've had to deal with reconciliation processes and whatever. But maybe most people that flew over their heads. Like, basically what happens is, like, there's a payment that comes in on your bank account, right? And that data goes into your accounting system. And there has to be something else somewhere where you're like, we spent money on this. And so the system is like, oh, okay, so this money that you said you spent on your, on your books, right, is this transaction on your bank? Is that correct? And it's like, yes. So basically, if you don't have that, right, you don't even basically, I don't even know how. I guess the government doesn't even get requests. It just gets told send money somewhere and just sends it, right? And did that person deliver what they were supposed to deliver? There's no, not only there's no check, there's no way to check. But here's how you know that this is bad: is that okay? Every private business is doing this, right? I'm talking about from your your plumber to the largest company in the world does this. So either all the private businesses are irrational and there's no point to doing this, or they're doing this for the reason that they're saying, which is to stop waste, and the government, which is the biggest organization in the history of the world, actually doesn't.
Well, there is a difference. There is a difference here, Al. Okay, a material difference. When a company does it, particularly if it's a publicly traded company, they are doing it for their investors to understand the economics and the finances of the company that they would be investing in. But the government just taxes you by mandate, so they don't actually have to make sure that they are providing you non-fraudulent information about their financials. They're just going to take your money whether you want to invest in them or not. So there's a material difference between those two situations.
Look. There is this rabbit hole in the world that's called Unitaid, right? Unitaid is a nonprofit who sends 44% of its income to the Clinton Foundation. Okay, I don't know why. And Unitaid, you know how they get paid? There's a law in some countries, I think France and Norway are two of them, where first-class seats on airplanes have a little fee that goes to Unitaid. I'm not kidding you, right? So literally, they're taxing random countries, and a lot of that money goes to the Clinton Foundation.
That's a good deal. That is a good deal. I want in on that deal.
It's pretty sweet. It's pretty sweet. And I bet you even those people do this. This is my punchline. Gotcha. Even people who like it's I listened to that podcast. I hadn't caught that clip. It is wild. And again, I warn people. Here's the thing, and it's gonna sound like a threat, but it's really, I'm trying to protect you. People should be extremely careful with the takes they're putting out right now, because the amount that's about to come out and leave people like naked when the tide goes out is going to be absurd, right? Like being sort of on the, we need to stop this and we need to push them back. And, I don't know what these oligarchs are doing. If the upshot is that, they discover not only like gargantuan waste, but also actual, crimes and war crimes on the other side of these money flows. I don't know. Just understand that this is not a singular event that just happened. It is a stream of events that has just begun.
I'm going to play a clip from the new Secretary of the Treasury just coming in, Scott Bessent, in an interview with Bloomberg.
I'm here with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in Washington. Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining me.
Hello, good to see you.
Mr. Secretary, we are inside the cash room at the Treasury Department. It is almost impossible to overstate how important the work that is done in this building is to the U.S. financial system. Yet right now, there is widespread concern about the Doge team's access to sensitive payment systems. Are you worried at all that that access and that tinkering of the payment systems could affect the Treasuries market or cause any disruption?
Good. Well, Philea, thank you for asking me about that, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. First of all, when you say the Doge team, these are Treasury employees, 2 Treasury employees, one of whom I personally interviewed in his final round. There is no tinkering with the system. They are on read only. They are looking, they can make no changes. It is an operational program to suggest improvements. So we make 1.3 billion payments a year. And this is 2 employees who are working with a group of longstanding employees.
The letter that the Treasury Department sent earlier this week talked about how the team currently does not have access to change the system. Have they at any point this year had the ability to make changes?
Absolutely not. This is no different than you would have at a private company. And by the way, the ability to change the system sits over at the Federal Reserve. So it doesn't even lie in this building. So they could make suggestions on how to change the system, but we don't even run the system.
And if they ask for, if they request the ability to change the system, would you grant that?
No, again, they have no ability to change the system. I have no ability to grant that change. That they can make suggestions, then it would go to the Federal Reserve, and just like any large ERP system, there would be tests, there would be this, there would be that, and then the Fed will determine whether these changes are robust or not.
As the Secretary of Treasury, you also oversee the IRS. Do you know what kind of access the team has to IRS data or individual taxpayer data?
Well, I'm glad you asked that too, because look, the IRS, the privacy issue is one of the biggest issues. And over the past 4 years, we've seen a lot of leaks out of there. The IRS systems are quite poor. When I started in college in 1980, I learned to program in COBOL. I think there are 12 different systems at the IRS that still run on COBOL. But as of now, there is no engagement at the IRS.
And if they request that access, would you sign off on that request?
They haven't, so we'll take that when it comes to it. I think there is a lot to do there, but the president was elected with a big agenda, and to the extent that getting the IRS in better shape is part of that. Sure, because look, with the IRS, what am I concerned about? I am concerned about collections, I'm concerned about privacy, and I'm concerned that the system is robust and customer service.
But do you think that if they ask for access, that is something you would consider signing off on?
There are a lot of things I'd consider, but look, we're in the middle of the tax filing season right now. We even, with the government buyouts that expire at midnight tonight, we have mandated that the IRS customer-facing employees, that they're not eligible for that until May 15th. So,
all right, so that's a slight twist on some of what has been discussed out there, particularly the fact that the Treasury systems aren't even really controlled by the Treasury; they're controlled by the Fed, which is a non-government entity.
Yeah, and by the way, this is another thing I've been observing. Right, everybody's like up in arms about Thing X, and they had no idea about Thing X yesterday, nor how it was done, nor who was accessing what, or how, or who. I even saw a report in the news that said, the federal government has been given a report about how the Doge team's access it may be like a huge cybersecurity risk. And then you read like to the second paragraph, and this was an alert raised by an external contractor. And you're like, how is an external contractor having access where presumably they have important information that they're able to deduce that what the government employees are doing, government machines are some kind of cybersecurity? It's like, go back to that contractor thing, please. Who are they? How many of them are there? Are there any others?
Edward Snowden was a contractor. He caused some ruckus. Well, I mean, speaking of being outraged, I tend to only be outraged depending on how the article is written. So if the article is written in a way where I should feel outraged, I get outraged. But if it's written in a nice, pleasant way, I don't get outraged. So, for example, this article from the Daily Mail: traumatized U.S. aid worker who survived Doge bloodbath describes horror of watching everyone get fired. That's a headline that gets my blood boiling. I'm outraged by this because that's terrible. They've survived the Doge bloodbath, but they're watching in horror as everyone gets fired. Terrible. They're traumatized, Alec. Traumatized.
I mean, tell us about the ones that didn't. I mean, what are you talking about the ones that didn't
survive this? A U.S. aid worker who managed to survive widespread cuts by Doge has described the horror watching their coworkers being fired. President Trump has gone scorched earth against the United States Agency for International Development Aid this week, claiming it is corrupt. Now, corrupt is in quotes. Interestingly enough, survived, bloodbath, horror, scorched earth are all fine without quotes in this article, but corrupt is the one that gets the quote.
So beautiful. It's just beautiful. It's already claimed. Like, he didn't claim that he was, quote, corrupt. He claimed that he was actually corrupt.
Yes, true. But corrupt is the one that gets the quotes. That's how I decide. What is
being careful. They don't want to imply anything.
Amidst huge amounts of layoffs at the agency, one staff member described to NPR how during a virtual staff meeting on Monday, people started leaving one by one as their access was cut off. The staffer said it was like from a horror film. All those horror films where people are just fired and let go. It was Friday the 13th, I believe, which is the one that started that trope in the horror business. Maybe it was Saw. Was Saw? Did he own a company and that was their layoff notice?
Yeah. He was cutting off department after department.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Big. When they say cuts, what do you think they mean? I don't know, man. Like it's again. I mean, look, this is a masterclass of what you can do with word celery, right? Like just wordsmithing, I guess. It's like if you were to drop all the bias from this, you will be left with, I don't know, federal employee describes experience after seeing many colleagues fired.
Yeah,
I suppose
losing your job can be sad. It can be scary. That's legitimate.
It happens all the time.
I could empathize with people, losing their jobs, whether or not I thought they should have a job or not. It's different, right? You have an expectation. But it's a bloodbath. Now, remember, when Donald said bloodbath on the campaign trail, that was a threat that he was actually going to have people murdered and slaughtered if he didn't win the election.
That is such a good point. Oh my God, you're so right. Bloodbath version.
But bloodbath is a perfect descriptor here. It's just normal language.
Excuse me. Promises made, promises kept. I think we have now fully closed the horseshoe and we're back in. He promised a bloodbath. We have a bloodbath. Why is anybody complaining?
There is no bottom to this stupidity, a separate USAID staffer told the public broadcaster. Another added that government might as well shut it all down. I agree. Let's do it. 290 people won't be able to do anything. Thank God. The Trump administration had
don't threaten me with a good time.
Exactly. The Trump administration had originally planned to keep 297 staff, but that number has now risen to 611, according to a notice issued late on Thursday night. On Friday, one worker could be seen crying as crews used duct tape to block out the agency name on a sign outside its headquarters, as they also tore down large lettering over the entranceway. Trump wrote earlier in his Truth Social, USAID is driving the radical left crazy, and there is nothing they can do about it because the way in which the money has been spent, so much of it fraudulently, is totally unexplainable. The corruption is at levels rarely seen before. Close it down. So that goes back to Skylab's difference of the usage of the word fraudulent. So the fraudulence in this case, I would just say, is not necessarily that there is fraud being committed, but that the usage of the funds goes against expectations people might reasonably have for the expenditures for that department. That would be the fraud version used there. So there are two different versions that Jesse would have to be accounting for if he's going to.
Oh, I'm pretty sure we'll find actual fraud, but it'll just take a minute. But yeah, in terms of like the government is taking your money and claiming to do certain things with it, and is funding, I don't know, transgender operas in Serbia, I think most people would say, even if they support the cause abstractly, they would say that's not what you're supposed to use my money for.
Right, and there's a unfortunate sort of issue with this, and Mike Benz is the person who's been fairly popular as the main person to go to, the central source for USAID information, because he's done a decent amount of study on it. But you don't actually have to go that far into his research about what it actually is to sort of understand how you get here. And so I'm going to go back to the actual act from 1961 that created it. And this is basically the part of the legislation that just explains why the bill is even existing, why it's being passed. It is the sense of the Congress that peace depends on wider recognition of the dignity and interdependence of men, and survival of institutions in the United States can best be assured in a worldwide atmosphere of freedom. To this end, the United States has in the past provided assistance to help strengthen the forces of freedom by aiding peoples of less developed friendly countries of the world to develop their resources and improve their living standards, to realize their aspirations for justice, education, dignity, and respect as individual human beings, and to establish responsible governments. The Congress declares it to be a primary necessity, opportunity, and responsibility of the United States, and consistent with its traditions and ideals, to renew the spirit which lay behind these past efforts, and to help make a historic demonstration that economic growth and political democracy can go hand in hand, to the end that an enlarged community of free, stable, and self-reliant countries can reduce world tensions and insecurity. It is the policy of the United States to strengthen friendly foreign countries by encouraging the development of their free economic institutions and productive capabilities, and by minimizing or eliminating barriers to the flow of private investment capital. Also, the Congress reaffirms its conviction that the peace of the world and the security of the United States are endangered so long as international communism continues to attempt to bring under communist domination peoples now free and independent, and to keep under domination peoples once free but now subject to such domination. It is therefore the policy of the United States to continue to make available to other free countries and peoples, upon request, assistance of such nature and such amounts as the United States deems advisable and is may be effectively used by free countries and peoples to help them maintain their freedom. So you go back to the original purpose, and right from there you can understand that this is an extension of the U.S. interest specifically to funnel money into locations for whatever may be deemed sort of a international politics purpose. It does not have to be something that a person might find reasonable, like some of the people are complaining about these expenditures with was it malaria, that was payments to combat malaria, etc. So some things people might find as legitimate expenditures aid-wise, foreign aid-wise, like, oh, okay, we want to help some people here with this problem. There was a flood somewhere, we're going to send money to help this flood zone or something like that. The intent of it primarily is to attempt to thwart communism's expanse and maintain governments that we are deeming have an appropriate version of democracy and freedom. So that is by definition going to be a propaganda endeavor, right? That's
well, the propaganda is that they are going around just like parachuting money to puppies and rainbows, right? And it starts with the name, by the way. I want to highlight something. I don't know if people have noticed this. Some people call it U.S. aid. Okay, U.S. United States aid, and that name is how people understand it. It's like the U.S. coming in and helping, right? What the name of the organization is United States of America International Development, right? USAID has nothing to do. Aid is not in there. It's literally a hallucination that is induced by branding. Just keep that in mind.
Well, yeah, and it does. Now, to be fair, though, it does have expenditures that would be in alignment with what people would classically consider aid, right? So there are expenditures that people would feel in line with that, because through the broad goal of trying to foster economic development in areas, because the idea, well, while the Soviet Union collapsed and China is now this weird hodgepodge of capitalism and communism, the reason for this the existence of this organization doesn't change just because communism might be checked off on a box as no longer being a threat. It's still going to find a reason to exist, and anything that they now can come up with to say is a threat to freedom and democracy can now be something that they are counteracting. So it can be something where economic instability or disease is threatening a region and its ability to be one of these zones of freedom, in which case the expenditures would make sense. But if it is something where you have the idea that Putin is now paying for propaganda and paying for outlets to push narratives that he wants in a country for political ends, now you have a justification to combat that with your own propaganda. And if your propaganda is going to be coherent to your interests, it now has to be in line with whatever you feel is the correct propaganda for your own native land. So you have to make sure that you're pushing these U.S. interests. And to the degree that the government had been overrun with people of a particular political persuasion, let's say, the output of the propaganda is also going to be in line with that. So unfortunately, the future of what this organization could wind up to be is baked into what it was when it was created.
Gator, do you remember the Tenet scandal?
Just maybe refresh me real quick.
Okay, so this came out before the elections, and I think the timing is important, where the FBI basically put out a lawsuit, that's the important part, with enough information for people to realize that this media company, which was founded by
Tenet Media with Lauren Southern, and not Lauren Southern.
Lauren Chen. Lauren Southern was involved, but Chen was the founder, and her husband,
Lauren Chen,
whose name I don't remember. And then they had basically made some contracts with Tim Pool and Benny Johnson and Matt Christensen.
Yes.
And I don't know, maybe a couple of others. It wasn't that many to do content for them. And this, so here's, and turns out that this company had gotten funding to do whatever it is they were doing by some funder that was like Russia linked. It was very vague how exactly they knew that this was, or they should have known or whatever, that this was like coming from Russia. But let's just grant it that this was like direct, money direct from the Russian version of USAID. Okay, this whole smoking gun of how this was turned into like it's an influence operation was a Slack message that was saying, "Hey, you should look at this story." Mm-hmm. Right? Not do it, but like, is anybody covering this or something like that?
Right.
Now, is there any doubt, right? Apparently, like 18 out of the 20 newspapers in Ukraine are having financial trouble because they're like, much of their funding has disappeared.
Right.
Is there any doubt that like what we're seeing here is like a million times whatever the worst thing that was alleged there, and yet, like literally not a year ago, not probably 6 months ago, everybody was up in arms about the Russian-funded podcasters or whatever, right? There was no evidence of an actual story going from suggestion to happening. Somebody said like, "Hey, look into this," and they didn't actually end up looking into it, as far as I remember. But like, give them everything they're claiming in that story, like, and now see this, which is like conservatively a million times worse.
Well,
I don't know. Like,
it's a million times worse in the sense that the one example we have of Tenet is being compared to an entire organization, but also it would be the premise that it is untoward for a government to engage in that type of behavior.
Exactly.
In this particular circumstance, these are American interests, and the only thing, even Mike Benz he was on Tucker Carlson, and I have a clip of him. He is not necessarily against the endeavor writ large. Okay, it's the particular application. So the let's say he's if you want to call it infestation, an infestation inside of it that has caused it to engage in many activities that are counterproductive to American ideals. So, for example, pushing propaganda and programs that try to encourage the EU to engage in anti-free speech endeavors against American corporations to try to circumvent our Constitution, to try to deprive us of our First Amendment rights via economic pressure from the EU. Right he feels that just those, if you got rid of those and a whole bunch of similar items, that the endeavor is possibly worthwhile to make sure that America's interests in the globe are maintained. Right. So you're going to wind up with it at some point again if you continue to do that. You have to be hyper vigilant to make sure that you don't have this kind of rut, because your entire purpose is to push propaganda and to influence other countries with whatever your message is.
Well, ultimately, this comes down to geopolitical realliance. What is the word? Realignment, right? Because at the end of the day, if the U.S. wants to play the global role, right, like this is just how the game is played. I mean, again, like Ben says, like you could do a little bit less transgender operas or whatever, but like the broad influence game is just going to be played, and this is why I've been kind of muted on the whole like Greenland, Panama, whatever story, because I see a path where the U.S. is more straightforward with its power. Right, like it just says, like, look, we're here in North America. This is our zone. Don't touch it. Right, and we can trade with you if you're over there. We're over here. You stay over there. Right, and that's fundamentally more honest. Even if a few Greenlands have to be broken to make that omelet. But what I'm trying to say is, like, right now the U.S. is trying to support. The PSYOP is the essence of this whole thing, right? Like this idea that, like, no, we're just the good guys. We're going around. We're just helping people. It's the poor people. We're just helping everybody. Just doing nice things. We don't have any agendas. What agendas? And then on the other side, it's like, well, this is really important for our agendas. That whole story, like, it just takes energy to maintain globally.
I do have a sequence of clips that will augment that point for you. A clip from Mike Benz on Tucker, and then followed by Chris Coons on Mike's Punish.
It's been struck. This is.
I will say
this week is really.
What's that?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
The first time, maybe in American history, with few exceptions, maybe in the 60s and 70s, that the blob, the foreign policy establishment that impacts so much of domestic affairs and sometimes controls it, has had to answer to the people that fund it. This is a shot across the bow. There have been so many tactics that they've been able to deploy to shift the course of domestic politics in order to ensure that their global vision stays the course. And there's been a blitzkrieg. I don't think they saw this coming. People have been lied to in this country, where they've thought that they've been sold that this was humanitarian aid and co-signed it. And let me come back to this point about the pencil, because maybe that'll just appear a little bit later in the story, and I'll just sort of hint at it now. But right now, the people who are trying to defend USA are stuck between a rock and a hard place. They want to defend it on humanitarian grounds, and then they get totally deluged with all the ways that it has gone wrong and all the horrible things that's funding. So then they then turn to layer two. This is sort of like Lindsey Graham defending our operations in Ukraine when it was, we need to do this for democracy. And then we say, okay, well, you canceled elections. There are all these non-democratic things that are happening. And he goes, okay. Layer two of my defense is there's $14 trillion worth of natural resources under the soil there. So, having it be a U.S. vassal state is advantage to us, because then we can exploit those $14 trillion worth of resources. I mean, that's what's implied there, right? Why would Americans benefit from Ukrainians exploiting that $14 trillion? Now, and by the way, that's not a knock on Ukraine, but you simply saw that shift happen when, as it got harder and harder to defend it on the basis of democracy promotion, the mask had to slip in order to defend it at the deeper level. It was to let people in. Okay, here's why we're really doing it. And every USAID program operates that way. It is getting back to this rock and the hard place analogy, is that they want to say it's humanitarian aid, but it's clearly done so much harm in so many places. It's doing such terrible things, funding the Wuhan lab, not to mention, the whole rest of the USA Truman Show. But then they go, okay, well, it's U.S. soft power. It advances U.S. strategic interests. And so you say, oh, okay, so it's not aid. And then it becomes very schizophrenic to defend this thing, because it's a labyrinth of lies. USAID's access and its reputation completely depends on its perception as being a kind of quasi-charity, even though, charity is nowhere to be found. It's a U.S. foreign policy instrument. Aid isn't even in the name. I've said this many times, but it's the Agency for International Development. And when you see aid, is your mind playing tricks on you?
And by the way, growing up, my dad worked with USAID. It was called USAID, not USAID, right? To make it clear to everybody, it was not an aid organization, right? But now they call it USAID,
right? Well, I'm sure in the Ronald Reagan building, but how it's colloquially known. And how it's described to the voters, it's described as humanitarian assistance.
Is funding Sesame Street a judicious use of soft power?
Well, Michael, the way you put it is the way I hope folks considering your poll today will think about it. This isn't just funding a kid show for children, millions of children in countries like Iraq. It's a show that helps teach values, helps teach public health, helps prevent kids from dying from dysentery and disease, and helps push values like collaboration, peacefulness, cooperation in a society where the alternative is ISIS, extremism, and terrorism. And to your point, it's pennies on the dollar. The U.S. Department of Defense has an annual budget of about $850 billion. USAID was spending about $30 billion. It is a small proportion of our total federal spending. And as Joe Nye would often say, it's not just soft power, it's smart power. Let me leave you with one other quote, Michael, if I could. Jim Mattis, who is a 4-star Marine Corps general and Trump's Secretary of Defense in his first term, in a hearing back then said, if you slash development and aid spending, then I'm going to need more bullets for our troops.
So if we go back to the original legislation that created this, I hope it's clear that you're always going to wind up with this. And even if you got, rid of this bill and repealed it and got rid of it, you would find another agency adopting sort of the role, unless you actually actively got into a mindset that this was not a business for foreign policy, because this mindset is baked into the slippery slope concept of U.S. interest. If it's in the U.S. interest, it gets funded, right? Like if it's going to support our international endeavors, if we have something like Russia where we consider them an adversary and we consider any advancement or successes that they have on the global stage as a loss to us, then we are going to engage in an activity that someone somewhere has said this is going to help us perform our goals, right? So in a silly example like Sesame Street in Iraq, where Elmo, I guess, has died of dysentery, you have some justification for fostering a democracy, a vibrant, freedom-loving democracy in Iraq, right? We have Elmo and Sesame Street here. We like it here. Let's import things that we like here over there. And ultimately, that type of logic, if you particularly the people in the administration are of the persuasion that the trans acceptance movement, if you might call it, where transgendered individuals are open and equally seen in society, are not forced to hide. They have access to whatever sorts of health services they want to have. They get to identify however they want. If that's the ideology you have, and you are now engaged in creating mini USs across the globe, that's the type of propaganda and the type of environment you are going to pay for through these services. There's no escaping it, I don't believe, unless you actually either have some sort of hawk-like administration that is completely transparent and has hard red lines about what is and is not acceptable under this umbrella, or you're going to have all sorts of things being permissible. It's just the ideology of the environment that you're operating under that dictates what you're actually spending it on.
There's, well, look, I think, first of all, the transparency is a big thing, right? So, you can have a shitty system, right, which is the U.S. government just is, right? There's and will continue to be at the end of the Trump administration and probably for, the foreseeable future. But with a lot of eyeballs on it, right, like those act as guardrails. So to the degree that, this stuff was happening, now people are tuned in, and it's going to be a lot more difficult to sort of, hide those things under the rug or whatever, right? Because ultimately, this is the neocon MO, right? Like what is, neoconservatives is a weird term because if you chase down the origins of their sort of founders, they were Trotskyites, which means internationalist communists, right? They wanted to sort of the global revolution, whatever. But in particular, they're sort of the vibe, even if you remove the Trotsky element, is we have the right values here. They should be everywhere, right? Spreading democracy, by Sesame Street or by 2,000-pound bombs, whatever it takes. But that also extends to spreading our values, right? So to the degree that our values become trans acceptance, then you get transgender operas in Serbia because, why not, right? It's a good thing.
While
should
the
be everywhere.
While the neocons might be a group that is most recent to put that blame on, that type of perspective goes far back to Woodrow Wilson, who was spearheading that international campaign rather directly as the origin, right? His projects were the projects that spawned that type of presentation with the international world.
Yeah,
so,
and it's not. They're not even. There's like the strict neocons, which is like a named group, right? And there's the broad neocons, which is like the people that of that attitude that are, sort of trying to like do the nation building and whatever, soft or hard nation building, if you like. But I have two more observations. One of them is that USAID was spending $47 billion a year. I believe Elon Musk was being shouted down when he was buying Twitter because it would only take $40 billion to end global hunger. You remember that?
Oh yeah. Well, I guess that is a misapplication of funds. Then I guess.
Yeah, I guess if buying Twitter is a misapplication of fund.
Well, hey, look, we just shut it all down, and now Elmo has dysentery again in Iraq, and I guess we can solve world hunger then.
Yeah. The other thing that I want you to observe is if Sesame Street is propaganda when filmed in Arabic, does filming it in English change the essence? I'll leave that question for the audience.
well, you do see that discussion or argument occur perennially anytime Sesame Street decides to introduce a new character. I may be wrong in the specifics on here, but the direction is correct. There was, I believe, a character introduced that had two moms or something recently, and people push back in saying that that's propaganda, right? So they have an idea that you do not discuss homosexual relationships. So people of the idea that there is no such thing as gay marriage. From their religious perspective, they believe that is a form of propaganda, trying to quote indoctrinate children and orient them towards normalizing quote that sort of societal behavior or societal arrangement as a marriage. So there are people who believe that type of thing is propaganda even on the homeland.
I'm just observing that, if the idea, like somebody sat down and said, even assuming Sesame Street is completely neutral, right? Somebody said, what do we need to project in there to make them, see things the way that we want them to see them? And they're like, Sesame Street. Cool. Let's do the Arabic production of that, right? Well, if that's the effect there, that's the effect here. Right, like how it emerges is a different story, but like there's something really interesting about the fact that children's programs here transposed to Iraq are propaganda.
Well, to be perfectly fair, it is all propaganda, and my threshold for calling something propaganda is extremely low because if you take a very literal approach to what propaganda is and is not, it is propaganda. It is purposeful propaganda.
Let me tie it up a little bit more.
Propaganda does not necessarily have to be deceptive, and it does not necessarily have to be towards ends you disagree with.
For sure. I mean, the discipline of propaganda was renamed to marketing after Second World War for some reason. I guess for the same reason that a lot of adults in the U.S. changed their name to Anthony. But the key point remains that this wasn't just propaganda; it was U.S. government approved and prioritized propaganda. It was like the message that they chose to send with their not very limited resources, but still ultimately limited.
Well, yeah, and you hear the excuses, let's call them, or the justifications from Chris Coons is that it was educating the locals about things that, let's say, the returns were high for the expenditure. The health education, simple things that could be done, as I've been mocking Elmo dying of dysentery, to avoid simple health, deleterious health outcomes. To avoid those with a little bit of education could go a long way under that sort of calculation. And so if you want to have a fostering democracy, a freedom, a loving area, you can't necessarily have too many people suffering, because too many people suffering usually winds up in some sort of revolution, thus making your democratic area fragile. So there is an intrinsic logic for why those things are sought out as endeavors by the apparatus, but it is not necessarily something that you can defend from a full spectrum of, well, if you're doing this, you could be doing this instead. A cost-benefit analysis across every single option that you have. It would never stack up to that, even if you could do it at this level.
Anyway, I think we've flogged the dead horse quite dead. I don't know if you want to visit anything else.
Now that we have a horse, we could turn it into glue. What can we glue together? Okay, so
we've had better segues, but this is one.
We can take some opinions or some feedback if anyone wants to volunteer to comment or add their thoughts on the things that we've discussed so far before we move on, because we're going to take a slightly different turn at this next juncture here. It will all be relevant to current things going on, but there is going to be a slightly historical detour of about 4 years. If anyone wants to request, please put up your requests now. Jacob, if you have any thoughts, since you're already up here.
I have a question.
Uh-oh.
So you guys know this much better than I do. Is there real concern in terms of security risks? And okay, you have these young Doge guys. Like, is there something that you guys actually do worry about, that like if the Democrats didn't have their hair on fire, they might actually be pointing to something real?
Well, so there's always a possibility that even under Elon Musk's direction, that let's call it theft of data, meaning that they are actually copying data in large amounts to find private gains under corporations of Musk's control for whatever reason. There is always a concern that someone could be doing that. If Elon Musk is solely in control of deciding the security measures to take, and he is somehow not partnering with the government on the standards that are going to be enacted, not verifying them with someone, and he has full control, then you have to take him at his word that he has assigned people who are capable of ensuring the correct security and are also not performing this data copy operation. There would be somewhat of a trust system unless you actually have the oversight from someone working for the government to make assurances. I'm not sure. I would bet that he has followed and complied with security personnel inside of the U.S. government during the approach to plan out how they were going to connect into the system, what the protocols were, and follow a minimal set of security standards, because it is part of a system where security standards are regular. Now, to that end, the Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton set up a personal email server in a freaking closet that was unsecured, and could have possibly been hacked by China. So the degree to which people can get away with such things might be higher than I understand. So there could be things along those lines that one could be concerned about, but without one of these people giving you something specific, it's just too vague to jump on.
I will go a little bit further here and say the following. I am choosing, basically, at this point, we don't have the time. Like, there's an instinct to say, like, slow all of this down. Even if it's being done properly, we need more transparency and accountability and process and best practices, like the other guy said, or whatever, right? Like, and on face value, it's very hard to argue with that. It's like, well, who doesn't want all those things? The problem is that this whole thing is operating on a timer, right? Like, the moment they hit the midterms, they're toast. They've actually given that deadline to themselves. Doge has sort of said, like, the project will be disbanded in 18 months. Of course, infrastructure will stay on, and who knows how much of this will survive or whatever. But like, formally, they've given themselves 18 months, and political time is moves fast, right? Like, you 3 months in a court here, 3 months in the court there. Before you know it, it's midterms. So at this point, I think we just have to make a choice of whether we like things the way they are, or we want to take this offer on the table to let these people go in there, map the whole thing out, try to figure out where the money's going, try to see what they end up surfacing, right? And see how it goes. And I'm making a conscious decision to say trust but verify, right? So if somebody comes up and says, like, this person with this phone, right, took this data and this is how we know, I will look into that. But if on a sort of a low information basis, like we are, and the amount of propaganda I've seen podcasts where well-known intellectuals that are very kind of well connected to the blob are saying, this is not the time to be lawyerly. This is the time to think like a propagandist. Okay. I got the clip. Yeah, please play it right now, because
that's where we're going. Play this. Okay. All right, hang on, it's loading.
How do you fight this thing? Here's the idea. that I want to try out. Based on what we know on patrimonialism, the incompetence will take care of itself. Pretty soon people will notice that the administration is chaotic and incompetent. However, one of the things we know is that the public is sensitive to corruption. We saw Navalny was very effective at using corruption against Putin, might in fact have brought him down. We see that the Peace Party in Poland, what brought them down was very largely, not exclusively, relentless focusing on their corruption. This administration will give no shortage of material to argue the case for corruption. So I think the right strategy is, yes, of course, do all that stuff that Galston and Kmart want to do, rebuilding a Democratic Party, moving it toward the center, developing an agenda, and not answering every fire drill with outrage. Fine, do all that. But what also needs to be done is a coordinated, unified, relentless messaging and branding exercise focusing on the corruption of the Trump administration. Every day, every way, you emphasize they are the most corrupt administration in history, unprecedented corruption, corrupt, day in, day out, coordinated, not just in response to the outrage of the day. This is a playbook that Newt Gingrich ran against Jim Wright and the Democrats in the early 90s, and it was effective. They, of course, had far less to go on than Democrats and other opposition figures do against the Trump administration right now. That exercise, I think, would at a minimum dent Trump et al.'s reputation for being, in some sense, the authentic voice of the people.
Okay, so I want to explore this a little bit with you. How it seems to me you would have to talk about a bunch of other things in the language of corruption. So instead of talking about Elon Musk and the cybersecurity risk of letting a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds giving them the keys to the Treasury Department payment system, you would have to frame that in terms of corruption somehow, which is doable, right? You could say, you know, the richest man in the world has bought access to the payment system at the risk of, you know, significant. But how do you frame, for example, what's going on at USAID or what's going on at FBI in terms of corruption? It seems to me easier to frame in terms of lawlessness, but what's Trump's pecuniary interest in the FBI?
Well, of course, you can talk about corruption in non-pecuniary terms, and that's very true. You can say that Trump is basically turning the government into his personal vehicle for enrichment and power, and he's using it to support his billionaire cronies who paid him spent hundreds of million dollars to elect him. So they're stealing your government. They're putting it in your pocket. The other thing I'd say about that, and you tell me what you think about this, is that this is not the time to think like a lawyer. This is the time to think like a publicist or maybe a propagandist. You
totally agree. Or an activist.
Or an activist, but this is a brand campaign. This is not about technical accuracy, arguing the fine points of the law, and it's also not about making the case to save democracy and the Constitution and the rule of law. This is a relentless branding exercise in which day after day you highlight the corruption of the Trump administration, and they give you plenty to work with. So it is very easy to tell a story about Elon Musk taking control of payment systems in order to profit himself and spending $300 million or whatever it is to elect himself. You can talk about the tax cuts, which are going to go to the very cronies who elected Trump instead of, for example, saving Social Security.
So the person who was the second voice in there was a man named Benjamin Wittes, or Wittes as some people pronounce it. And he is not an unknown person. So that conversation was not insignificant. That wasn't just two people having a conversation on a podcast. And I'm going to take you through a little journey just of recent history with Benjamin Wittes so that you can understand what role he plays.
Can I say, I think I'm the person that surfaced that clip, and I've started watching this guy's stuff. I don't actually know the history, so I'm looking forward to learning. But it is fucking fascinating, dude. Like, he's got 2 channels, and it's like I found the password to the Zoom calls of Blue Anon. It is unfucking believable.
Yes,
and I mean, material
yes.
like this, right? And people like Roush are not random either, right? Like these are like Sam Harris types, very friendly with David Frum and DeResta and Applebaum.
If you go look at Brookings Institution alums, you're going to find a lot of assholes.
Anyway, long story short, I got the vibe that this was an important conversation, not because I knew the guy, but because of context from the rest of the conversation, that this was actually actionable stuff. This wasn't like what would we do if we could? It's like, we can, what are we going to do?
So you're going to get I'm going to satisfy your curiosity and give
Very
you this
good.
historical.
Please. My body is ready.
All right. So we're going to start with a Washington Post article. This is some of it's going to make sense as I fill this out, but we're going to start with this Washington Post article titled, quote, "Is this a thing? Is this a boom? How Washington copes with the insane Trump era news cycle." So we are back in the first administration. Benjamin Wittes, a legal commentator with a large Twitter following, was on an airplane last month when the FBI raided the office of President Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen. He spent hours unaware of the news, a fact that seems to have sparked a mini existential crisis. My first reaction was, if I had known about that, I would have boomed a baby cannon, Wittes said in an interview. Boomed a baby cannon? For the uninitiated, Wittes, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, likes to tweet out big stories with one-word commentary. Boom. Often with video of a tiny cannon blowing something up. Missing a blockbuster story had him worried about the credibility of the whole project. I grew concerned that the boom was going to lose all of its emotional and, for that matter, intellectual power, said Wittes, a former member of the Washington Post editorial board. If he were to elevate relatively small news developments but miss the biggest one, he wondered, who will trust the booms are booms? Every week, Twitter streams swell with stories that travel at whitewater speeds. The Russians met with Trump in the Oval Office. The president thinks America is filled with shithole countries. Former FBI Director James Comey has memos. Kanye said what? Phones buzz with email alerts, and television chyrons try to keep up with indictments. FBI raids and personnel changes. NSC Director Mike Flynn resigns. Secretary Tom Price resigns. EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt. Wait, has that happened yet? We've all got questions, and special counsel Robert Mueller has them too. In fact, he's got 49 of them, covering all topics from real estate deals in Moscow to Attorney General Jeff Sessions' decision to recuse himself from the Russia investigation, according to the latest report from the New York Times. Across the country, but especially in and around Washington, people are trying to figure out how to consume news when the news is all consuming. Every time news breaks, it means thousands of people look to their loved ones, to Twitter, to Slack, and ask, does this matter? Is this a thing? Is this a boom? I feel like I'm losing my mind sometimes, said Vivian Schiller, the former head of NPR and now a self-described news addict. Like everybody, I have all my alerts that come across my phone, said Frank Sesno, the director of the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. It happens like every 10 seconds, and every time something beeps, I look. I live in a world where before I go to the shower, I have to check Twitter, said Neera Tandon, the head of the Center for American Progress, a liberal think tank, which, if you recall from several weeks ago, was created by John Podesta. When you see a boom, it's me saying this is a really big deal, Wittes said. The problem with the methodology is I'm not sure I know what the threshold of a really big deal is anymore. Now, Benjamin Wittes, in this article, as it was sort of introducing to the Washington Post reader, Benjamin Wittes was cultivating an online following, and not just an online following. Many of the large progressive liberal side was following his account daily to try to find out what dots to connect any given day that would supposedly lead to the eventual ousting of President Trump. He was seen as a go-to resource, and we will find out why he was seen as a go-to resource. But those little cannons, he would post GIFs of tiny little cannons exploding. The idea would be that, you weren't going to take out Donald Trump with one of these tiny things, but if you fire enough of them, eventually you will take him. So Benjamin Wittes, as an article from CBS News will explain, Comey was flustered by Trump. Friend of former FBI chief says. A friend of James Comey says that the former FBI director tried to maintain some distance from the White House despite President Trump's demand for loyalty, and says that Comey was skeptical of Rod Rosenstein before he was confirmed as Deputy Attorney General. The friend, Benjamin Wittes, wrote on his blog Lawfare Thursday night that he had lunch in Comey's office on March 27th. He says Comey shared information that Wittes is now questioning following Mr. Trump's decision to fire Comey last week. During the lunch, Wittes said that Comey had described at least 2 incidents that Comey regarded as the president trying to compromise him by demonstrating an image of closeness between them. One of those incidents, he said, took place just a few days after inauguration when the president invited law enforcement to the White House. Comey was standing in the room during an event and tried to camouflage himself, Wittes said, so that Mr. Trump couldn't notice him. He told me the story. He tried hard to blend into the background and avoid any one-on-one interaction. He was wearing a blue blazer and noticed that the drapes were blue. So he stood in the back right in front of the drapes, hoping Trump wouldn't notice him, camouflaged against the wall, Wittes wrote. So during the initial Trump term, in the very first few months, there was, which we'll get into, there was a lot of back and forth between Trump and Comey. And Comey used Benjamin Wittes and one other person to start the narrative campaign in the press about his eventual ousting, so that they could start to incorporate a larger shadow on Trump with respect to Russia. So the behavior here, in particular, weird quotes like this: as he told me in the story, he tried hard to blend into the background and avoid any one-on-one interaction. He was wearing a blue blazer and tried to camouflage with the drapes. Weird shit like that became sort of a draw to people who wanted the dramatics of this movie that they were watching, where Trump would eventually wind up being taken down. And this is where they started to get their first hook and started to latch on to Benjamin Wittes, because he was friends with James Comey and presumably friends with a lot more people in the intelligence community. So to look at the degree to which Benjamin Wittes and in conjunction with James Comey were basically manipulating the whole narrative from the start to finish, we do have to go back and talk about the sequence of events leading into Trump assuming office and the early months. And primarily, we just have to focus on Michael Flynn, because this paints the picture very strongly. Both of Benjamin Wittes being a son of a bitch, and James Comey also being a son of a bitch. So, during the Trump transition, I'm reading some stuff that I pre-wrote because there's story, it has details that need explained. During the Trump transition, Flynn was going to be a national security advisor. And on December 29th, 2016, Barack Obama initiates the sabotage of the incoming administration with respect to Russia. So right after Trump was declared the winner, they started the campaign that says that he only won because of Russian influence. Hillary Clinton starts saying that he's an illegitimate president because the Russians manipulated the election. Depending on which atmosphere, she sort of bordered on saying that they actually hacked the voting machines without explicitly saying it. In other ways, it was just that they influenced it somehow, and that it was only because of Russia and Russian influence that Trump was president. But on December 29th, Barack Obama actually initiated a whole slew of retaliatory efforts against Russia in response to their abuse of our electoral system. So today, I have ordered a number of actions in response to the Russian government's aggressive harassment of U.S. officials and cyber operations aimed at the U.S. election. These actions follow repeated private and public warnings that we have issued to the Russian government and are necessary and appropriate response to the efforts to harm U.S. interests in violation of established international norms and behavior. All Americans should be alarmed by Russia's actions. In October, my administration publicized our assessment that Russia took actions intended to interfere with the U.S. election process. Today, I have ordered a number of actions in response. I have issued an executive order that provides additional authority for responding to certain cyber activity that seeks to interfere with or undermine our election processes and institutions, or those of our allies and partners. Using this new authority, I have sanctioned 9 entities and individuals, the GRU and the FSB, 2 Russian intelligence services, 4 individual officers of the GRU, and 3 companies that provided material support to the GRU cyber operations, et cetera, et cetera. Lots more sanctions and lots of individuals being cast out. So now Trump is the president to be. He's in the transition phase, and he has Michael Flynn call an ambassador to Russia named Kislyak. He has him call him because basically Obama, on his way out, just 3 weeks left in his term, January 20th was going to be the inauguration, right? He goes over and he just starts effectively a large, diplomatic controversy for Trump to now have to pick up. So he has Michael Flynn call this ambassador Kislyak. And that was well within Michael Flynn's purview. There is no problem at all with Michael Flynn calling Kislyak. So the Obama administration at the time had Kislyak's communications wiretapped. And by protocol, U.S. citizens are supposed to be what they call masked in those communications, because supposedly the United States likes to adhere to privacy regulations, and it's not okay to spy on U.S. citizens without a warrant. So the person that Kislyak would be speaking to is what they call masked. Well, Susan Rice, who was the national security advisor for Obama at the time, ordered the name of the individual Kislyak was speaking to unmasked. She ordered it. And supposedly there is supposed to be a justification for doing so about some sort of national security threat that required you to unmask these people, etc., but she didn't provide one. So they determine that it's Michael Flynn. So Trump takes office, and 2 FBI agents go to talk to Michael Flynn, and they start asking him about this phone call. Now, they have the full recording and transcript of this phone call, so they know exactly everything that was spoken and everything that was discussed. So they go and they talk to Michael Flynn. And while there is no transcript of the conversation they had, over time, it's generally understood that he was telling them he didn't remember things about the conversation, but he didn't believe that he had spoken about these sanctions that Obama had put in. His purpose at the time was actually to call Kislyak and have ask Kislyak to ask Putin to not retaliate and just wait until Trump is in office, and they'll handle this. So these FBI agents go and they question him, and his answers don't match to some degree this phone call that they have tapped, but they don't, to my knowledge, tell him that they have it tapped. And immediately after that, the rumors start to spread that Michael Flynn had lied to the FBI and also lied to Mike Pence. And the controversy lasts in the media for a couple days. And Trump asks Flynn to resign, primarily for what Trump says is the crime of lying to Mike Pence. He says he can't have his people lying to the vice president. And the media starts laying on the idea that by calling Kislyak, Michael Flynn has violated what was called the Logan Act. NPR says the Logan Act lingers for others in Russia probe. All eyes look to the Trump ladder. The Atlantic, did Michael Flynn violate the Logan Act? Now, if you're politically astute and you've been following this to any degree over the last, now 8 years, and you were heavily involved or invested, you would know that the Logan Act is something that says that you can't, start to perform diplomatic functions as citizens in opposition to the United States aims. But you also would remember that there has never been a prosecution of the Logan Act since its inception, and that this legal theory was bogus, right? It was a legal theory that wound up being pushed in all of the press to pile on to the Trump. We're going to get Trump. He's going to be out of the office. It was only because the Russians were going to get him. He was in collusion with them. It was to pile on to the perception that there were crimes that they were going to get him for. So the Logan Act idea is being pushed over and over again. Eventually, Michael Flynn is charged with lying to the FBI. Okay, for his statements that did not align with the recordings that they have of him talking to Kislyak. And at the same time that Comey has Benjamin Wittes go to the media and start talking about how Trump wanted him to sign a loyalty pledge, and he was hiding from Trump in the curtains. He actually leaks memos to another friend to go to the press with, to talk about this behavior too. So we're going to go through the memos, because the memos are fascinating and really point to this whole operation that Benjamin Wittes and Comey were pushing, narratively speaking, in the media. So one of the first articles that explains how shitty Comey was being with his behavior here. Comey thought leaking memo describing Trump meeting could spur special counsel appointment. So he had an intent, a specific intent of trying to further the Russia investigation by leaking these memos. So as we go through the memos, hopefully we will see something fucking alarming that justifies this special counsel probe. Former FBI Director James Comey told the Senate Intelligence Committee on Thursday that he took steps to get his version of a meeting with the president to the news media, believing that doing so might trigger the appointment of a special counsel. Comey said he wrote memos summarizing his interactions with President Donald Trump because he feared Trump would lie about the nature of the meetings. In those meetings, Trump asked Comey for loyalty, and he said he hoped Comey would let go of the investigation into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's contacts with Russia, Comey said in prepared testimony for the committee. We're going to go through the memos. On January 7th, so this is right before Trump assumes office, one of the part of the memo says, I said the Russians because Comey is now meeting and briefing Trump. I said the Russians allegedly had tapes involving him and prostitutes at the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton in Moscow from about 2013. He interjected, there were no prostitutes. There were never prostitutes. He then said something about him being the kind of guy who didn't need to go there, and laughed, which I understood to be communicating that he didn't need to pay for sex. He said 2013 to himself, as if to remember that period of time, but didn't add anything. He said he always assumed that hotel rooms he stayed in were when he traveled were wired. I replied, I do as well. Okay, so that memo establishes that they were talking about the infamous rumored P tape. And if you weren't familiar, there was a rumored P tape that was inside of what they call the Steele dossier by a man named Michael Steele, who was commissioned by the Hillary Clinton campaign to do Oppo research on Donald Trump. And inside of this report, there was a rumor that Russia was in possession of some tape in which Trump was in a Russian hotel room with two prostitutes, and they were urinating on the bed because it was a bed that Obama had slept in once. This is the rumor, and so there was some sort of tape involving urination on the bed. January 28th, Comey's memo. He touched on my future at various points. The first time he asked, so what do you want to do? Explaining that lots of people wanted my job, about 20 people. That he thought very highly of me and had heard great things, and that the people of the FBI really liked me, but would understand if I wanted to walk away given all I had been through. Although he thought that would be bad for me personally because it would look like I had done something wrong. He said that he, of course, could make a change at the FBI if he wanted, but he wanted to know what I thought. There was no acknowledgement by him or me that we had already talked about this twice. I responded by saying that he could fire me at any time he wished, but that I wanted to stay and do a job I love and think I'm doing well. I explained that I never expected to be back in government, but I had found this job hugely rewarding and wanted to serve out my term. I added that I was reliable in one way, but not the way political people sometimes use the term. Now, I will remind you of this quote, but I want you to try to think about it as you hear the rest of the story. I explained to him that he could count on me always to tell him the truth. I said, I don't do sneaky things, I don't leak, and I don't do weasel move. But I was not on anybody's side politically and could not be counted on in that traditional political sense, which I said I thought was in the president's best interest. He asked whether the FBI leaks, and I answered that, of course, an organization of 36,000, we were going to have some of that, but I said I think the FBI leaks far less than people often say. I predicted he, like all presidents, would discover the entire government leaks like crazy, and explained that it often comes from the first or second hop from those actually working on the sensitive thing. He replied that he needed loyalty and expected loyalty. I did not reply or even nod or change my facial expression, which he noted because we came back to it later. The conversation then swerved into a long discussion of the email investigation about Hillary Clinton. At about this point, he turned to what he called the golden showers thing, the P-tape, and recounted much of what he had said previously on that topic. He repeated that it was a complete fabrication and fake news. I explained again why I had thought that it important that he know about it. I also explained that one of the reasons we told him about the rumor was that the media, CNN in particular, was telling us they were about to run with it. He said it bothered him if his wife thought there was even a 1% chance it was true in any respect. He said he had spoken to people who had been on the Miss Universe trip with him, and they had reminded him that he didn't stay overnight in Russia for that, which would have been the 2013 event. He said that he arrived in the morning, did events, and then showered and dressed for the pageant at the hotel and left for the pageant. Afterwards, he returned only to get his things and departed for New York by plane the same night. He said he thought maybe he should ask me to investigate the whole thing to prove it was a lie. I did not ask any questions. I replied that it was up to him, but I wouldn't want to create a narrative that we were investigating him because we were not. And I worried such a thing would be misconstrued. Now, Alex, I want you to say to me right now, do you notice anything missing from these discussions so far in Comey's memos?
I don't know, a lot. What's standing out for you?
There is no discussion that in these memos that Trump is concerned about in being investigated for any stupid fucking collusion with Russia for the presidency. He's focused on this goddamn P-tape.
Yep. And even the loyalty thing in context is like, he's like, people are leaking, and he's like, I need loyalty. I.e., I need people to not fucking leak what I tell them.
Right.
You know,
right.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like it's
gonna get more interesting. So February 8th, 2017. This is before the Flynn fiasco blows up in the media. The president brought up. This is, again, another memo. The president brought up the golden showers thing and said it really bothered him if his wife had any doubt about it. He then explained, as he did at our dinner, that he hadn't stayed overnight in Russia during the Miss Universe trip. Twice during this part of the conversation, Reince Priebus tried to interject a comment about the redacted and why was it even in there. But the president ignored him. The president said the hookers thing is nonsense, but that Putin had told him that we have some of the most beautiful hookers in the world. He did not say when Putin had told him this, and I don't recall it redacted. Then February 14th, when Flynn resigns. Now, Flynn hasn't been discussed in any of these memos so far. He began by saying he wanted to talk about Mike Flynn. He then said that although Flynn hadn't done anything wrong in the call with the Russian, correct, he had not done anything wrong in the call with Russians, a point he made at least 2 more times in the conversation, he had to let him go because he misled the vice president, whom he described as a good guy. He explained that he just couldn't have Flynn mislead the vice president, and in any event, he had other concerns about Flynn, and he had a great guy coming in, so he had to let Flynn go. He then returned to the topic of Mike Flynn. This was after some other stuff that wasn't important, saying that Flynn is a good guy and he has been through a lot. He misled the vice president, but he didn't do anything wrong in the call. He said, I hope you can see your way clear of letting this go to letting Flynn go. He's a good guy. I hope you can let this go. I replied by saying, I agree he's a good guy, but said no more. March 30th. He began joking that I was getting more publicity than he. I replied that I hate it. He then said he was trying to run the country, and the cloud of this Russia business was making that difficult. He said he thinks he would have won the healthcare vote, but for the cloud. He then went out on a great length, explaining that he has nothing to do with Russia. He has a letter from the largest law firm in DC saying he has gotten no income from Russia. He was not involved with hookers in Russia. Can you imagine me? Hookers? I have a beautiful wife, and it's been very painful. Is bringing a personal lawsuit against Christopher Steele, the guy who wrote the dossier with the P-tape allegation. Always advised people to assume they were being recorded in Russia, and has accounts now from those who traveled with him to the Miss Universe pageant that he didn't do anything, etc. He asked what I could do to lift the cloud. I explained that we were running it down as quickly as possible, and that there would be great benefit if we didn't find anything to our good housekeeping seal of approval, but we had to do our work. He agreed, but then returned to the problems it was causing him. Went on a great length about how bad he was for Russia because of his commitments to more oil and more nukes. He said something about the hearing last week. I responded by telling him I wasn't there and I wasn't there as a volunteer, and he asked who was driving that. Was it Nunes who wanted it? Skip that part. I reminded him that I had told him we weren't investigating him, and I had told the congressional leadership the same thing. Now, this becomes important. So in the background of all this, there was no specific FBI investigation that was investigating Donald Trump in the sense that it would have been investigating Hillary Clinton for her email scandal. There was no active investigation. So he has been told this, Trump has been told this, that they are not investigating him. They have told him this in the background multiple times. And so when he's talking about Comey lifting the cloud, he's talking about all the media coverage that is continuously, compounding on him day after day, that, he was in collusion with Vladimir Putin to, rig the election and win it over Hillary Clinton. So Comey's here talking about, I reminded him that I told him we weren't investigating him, and that I had told the congressional leadership the same thing. He said it would be great if I could get that out, and several times asked me to find a way to get that out. So the FBI is being silent. So the DOJ and the FBI is not publicly stating that Trump is not under investigation, and therefore, given all of the media coverage, all the public perception can be is that he is under investigation. Particularly when you go back to the Flynn's, did he violate the Logan Act and the additional things with Russian meddling in the election. So now we go to April 2017. I returned the president's call this morning at 8:26 Eastern. We spoke for about 4 minutes, and he was following up to see if I did what he had asked last time. So we are now in April, and that was March 30th. So this is somewhere in April. I don't know exactly when, because the day of the month was awkwardly written. We spoke for about 4 minutes. He said he was following up to see if I did what he had asked last time, getting out that he was personally not under investigation. I replied that I had passed the request to the acting attorney general and had not heard back from him. He spoke for a bit about why it was so important. He was trying to do work for the country, visit with foreign leaders, and any cloud, even a little cloud, gets in the way of that. Because the foreign leaders would be expecting, to have this controversy unfold and not know if they'd be dealing with Donald Trump long term, or if he was the person they should be, making broad deals with, because his longevity might be stunted. So that's the last Comey memo. Okay, nowhere in these memos is anything particularly damning about Donald Trump, with the exception of this, one time asking him for loyalty, and in the sense of just saying, I need loyalty. The rest of it is about the P-tape, and he asked him once to drop whatever they were doing with Mike Flynn, because Flynn didn't do anything wrong on the call. And that's going to come back as important, because Flynn didn't do anything wrong on the call. Now, the degree to which Comey was actively pursuing a sort of a sabotage comes to light in Comey's post administration behavior. So when he was let go, he went and wrote a book. And he then did a press tour for that book, and he started to let certain details slip, or maybe in fleeting moments of braggadocio, he started to show his schemy hand a bit. So, if you recall, at the beginning of the Trump administration, 2 agents go and they talk to Mike Flynn about this call. Mike Flynn was unmasked because Susan Rice unmasked him with no real purpose.
You look at this White House now, and it's hard to imagine 2 FBI agents ending up in the same room. How did that happen?
I sent them. Something I probably wouldn't have done or maybe gotten away with in a more organized investigation, a more organized administration. The FBI wanted to send agents into the White House itself to interview a senior official. You would work through the White House counsel, and there'd be discussions and approvals, and who would be there. And I thought, it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
So these 2 agents, Comey sends them to go interview Flynn without any official preparation. So they just sideline Flynn with what he believes is just a casual conversation. It's not an official interrogation. It's not an official questioning. There's just 2 FBI agents walking in up to him because Comey saw an opportunity that he himself says that he exploited. He just saw that the incoming administration was not paying attention to standard protocol, didn't understand standard protocol, and wouldn't make these agents go through the normal operating procedure to have an interview with a senior administration official. He just sends them. So Michael Flynn in this conversation is not even preparing to have a discussion about the topic that they're coming over to discuss with him. Now, Michael Flynn, at some point, pleads guilty to lying to the FBI. And the lying to the FBI was the only charge that he was convicted of. He was never charged with any crime involving the phone call itself. It was only what they would call a procedural crime. So it's a crime committed in the procedure of justice. So sometimes they call it obstruction. That's a specific charge, but this one is lying to the FBI. And Comey was still on his book tour, and he was giving various discussions about this particular aspect. And this comes back, this issue of the conversation that Flynn had with the agents comes back.
Last Friday, the House Intelligence Committee released an unredacted section of its final Russia report. It says that FBI agents never really believed that Michael Flynn was lying about his conversation with Ambassador Kislyak. You'll remember this is the conversation where they talked about sanctions, and he indicated to agents that they did not. Rather, the agents felt that he was confused. Did General Flynn tell agents interviewing him that his conversation with Ambassador Kislyak was likely recorded and that they should review that tape?
I don't remember as I sit here. This bit in the House report about the FBI not believing he had been confused or not testified falsely. I don't know where that's coming from.
Really?
That was never my sense, never the sense of the agents who interviewed him.
Okay. Did the Justice Department misstep in any way by prosecuting Michael Flynn because he appeared?
So she says, okay, like in response to that, where he says, I don't recall that. Well, Washington Post, Comey claimed he didn't tell Congress that FBI agents thought Flynn was not intentionally lying. So you got a whole bunch of double negatives in that title there. But in a letter dated May 11th to FBI Director Christopher A. Wray and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, Senator Charles Grassley quoted from notes taken by a career nonpartisan law enforcement officer who attended a March 15th, 2017 briefing by Comey. The agent quoted Comey as saying the FBI agents saw nothing that led them to believe he was lying. Grassley also quoted from the committee staff notes that agents saw no change in his demeanor or tone that would say he was being untruthful. The majority report of the House Intelligence Committee includes a finding that FBI agents did not detect any deception during Flynn's interview. As evidence, the report quotes Comey from a private briefing on March 2nd, 2017. The agents discerned no physical indications of deception, They didn't see any change in posture, in tone, in inflection, in eye contact. They saw nothing that indicated to them that he knew that he was lying to them. The majority report also quoted from a briefing given by Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe on December 19th, 2017, after Flynn pleaded guilty. The conundrum that we faced on their return from the interview is that although the agents didn't detect deception in the statements that he made in the interview, the statements were inconsistent with our understanding of the conversation, and he actually had with the ambassador. McCabe added, the two people who interviewed Flynn didn't think he was lying, which was not a great beginning of a false statement case. So, in the background, they understood initially that they had nothing to go on with Flynn, because even though they attempted to bamboozle him, so they attempted to get him off kilter and catch him in something, because that's why Comey sent them over there, to just go and abruptly interrupt him with without any preparation. They didn't actually in private believe that he was lying, yet they then charged him as a department with lying to the FBI. So the same WAPO interviewer asks a follow-up question.
To be saying to people, hey, I don't remember it exactly, go look at the tape. It shows sort of a lack of intent to lie if he said such a thing.
He pled guilty and allocuted, which means explain to the court why I'm guilty. And I did this knowing it was wrong. I mean, any of you ever sat in a court and listened to what's called a Rule 11 colloquy, where the judge makes sure that you're guilty? People ought to get that transcript.
This will sound funny coming from a federal court reporter, an old court reporter, but is it possible to plead guilty to something that's the lesser charge when you're implicated in maybe some other things that are more worrisome? And that lesser charge isn't something that you actually believe you're guilty of?
Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. Yeah, I mean, so I can't say it never happens, but it strikes me as a very, very...
So he's discounting the idea that Michael Flynn would plead guilty to something that he wasn't guilty of. The ABC News, a year after, Flynn selling house to pay legal bills in Trump probe. Michael Flynn, a retired Army general and ex-Trump national security advisor who pleaded guilty last year to lying to FBI agents about his Russia contacts, has put his Virginia home up for sale to pay mounting legal fees, friends and family members told ABC News. Flynn's 13-year-old three-bedroom townhouse in Old Town Alexandria outside Washington, which he bought 3 years ago, was listed for sale in December with an asking price of $895,000, money he will use to pay his high legal defense debts, his brother Joe Flynn said Monday. That is a reasonable piece of information to suggest that perhaps he pled guilty to stop the bleeding of money he had in expenses defending himself. That is something that happens throughout the country, particularly at different levels of criminal investigation.
Comey's a lawyer, right?
Yes.
And he's been a prosecutor?
Yes.
And he doesn't know that people plead guilty to stuff that they didn't do?
Well, not when he's on stage like that. Come on.
Are you fucking kidding? Like, I mean, he's either functionally retarded or just what he is, which, fill in your own insult here. But like, yeah. I don't know. Like it's
now, mind you, Comey has personally dropped those memos, and I read the memos to you. I did exclude a couple paragraphs because they were going to be too long otherwise, but they were not. I did not materially leave anything out that would have made them more dramatic than what I read to you. And Comey specifically said he leaked the memos to a friend in order to get a special counsel. So he purposely took that action in order to increase the pressure on Trump with this Russia collusion bullshit, without any semblance that the Russian collusion narrative would have panned out. So he knows that the president is telling him that he's under a lot of difficulty actually being president and performing diplomatic activities with other countries because of this thing. He's asking Comey to help him out and say, hey, look, can you tell people I'm not under investigation? Comey goes, I'll do worse than that. I'll get a special counsel prosecutor onto you now, just because I'm going to leak something to the press. Now, the memos were not leaked in full immediately. They were leaked themselves later. But the fact that his friend had received the memos and had like dictated to a reporter some of the contents, that was much earlier.
So did you watched the Gabbard hearing, right?
I did not.
Okay, well, for some reason, like multiple of her questioners were focused on asking her the question over and over. It must have been asked like 10 times. Is Edward Snowden a traitor? Because, of course, he leaked information, right? So he betrayed the country. And apparently, I did not know this. I'm just learning it now. We have information that a former head of the FBI was leaking information strategically, particularly to harm his boss, on stuff that he no reason to believe it was true. Yep. And he's in good standing right now, right, with a blob. Comey is like a fucking hero. He's on some boards and enjoying some, I don't know, some defense contractor sort of consulting gig, or what's the deal?
Yeah. So Benjamin Wittes is one of the people that he leaked to. He didn't give him the memos, but he told them basically the same contents and gave him a narrative to go to the media with. And Benjamin Wittes, in parallel to all of this, is basically corralling all of the wonks. So if you recall from the article I read introducing Benjamin Wittes and his tiny cannons, there were many powerful people who followed his account so that he could connect the dots for them. He would post an article that he would say is connecting a dot, and he'd post a tiny cannon. And that would be how they got their information daily throughout this process. So he was an active participant.
The dots, right? It's a synchronization point. It's like this is what we're talking about today. So it's not so much tell me what's true, but it's more like self-fulfilling prophecy, right? But because by putting this out there and having people write about it afterwards, it becomes a canon because he's
controlling the narrative. He's participating in controlling the narrative,
right?
Particularly because he's already known to have insider info, because he had lunch with Comey. He already has other reasons to be somewhat involved. I mean, he was a Brookings Institution alum and has the Lawfare blog wasn't created the same day that this all went down. So he has established connections. But the fact that he was one of the spawners of the entire story with Comey gave him even more of a central focus to all of the people who wanted more of this soap opera unfolding. So he had an extensive ability to control the narrative by telling them which news stories to pay attention to on a daily basis. So that's all going on while I'm describing this Comey stuff. So while Comey is the central figure, Benjamin Wittes is doing the narrative shaping in the back end, sort of in tandem. So now, May 7th, 2020, Justice Department moves to drop case against Michael Flynn. In court documents filed Thursday, the Justice Department said that after a considered review of all the facts and circumstances of this case, including newly discovered and disclosed information, the government concluded that Flynn's interview by the FBI in January 2017 was untethered to and unjustified by the FBI's counterintelligence investigation into Mr. Flynn. So he was being investigated for some other stuff, but it was completely unrelated to the question of his call with Kislyak, and that it was conducted without any legitimate investigative basis. So basically, as the conclusion when they're dropping the case, they're saying he was allowed to call Kislyak in general by the transition. He was going to be the security advisor, and he had permission to talk and reach out to contacts who he would be doing business with in his official capacity. There was no violation of any laws when he did that. So the only law would be lying to an FBI agent, but the reason for asking him those questions wasn't even predicated on an active investigation about him. So they asked him questions about something, and then they accused him of lying, even though the questions that they were asking about had nothing to do with any cases that they actually had under investigation. And that is a requirement for having a penalty of lying to an investigator, FBI agent. You have to be lying about something that they're actively investigating. And that's on top of the fact that the agents themselves said that they didn't think he was lying. So it's just level after level of invalid bullshit.
Gator, I don't know if you've dug into this, but I seem to recall that the reason that Flynn settled was because they threatened his son, or something about, basically it was kind of a deal that they would let his son go if he.
There was some. You're correct. There was some talk about that. I focus on the legal expense because that's the most easy to prove. I don't know if I have evidence to prove the other thing, but I have also heard that discussion.
Okay. Well, I mean, we have a better basis than Comey had to open an investigation. So there's that.
So we come in and we start to tie Comey's assholishness up here, and we get to the end of the Mueller investigation, where, of course, we know that nothing was really found involving Trump and collusion, as expected. But then there was an Inspector General's investigation of the entire unfolding of the pre-Trump and early Trump era, involving all of the investigations that were taking place. And Chris Wallace corners James Comey in this aftermath, and we hear Comey react to some of the unfoldings from the Inspector General's report.
Former FBI Director James Comey. Director, welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having me.
You have been taking something of a victory lap since the IG report was released earlier this week. The question is whether or not it's justified. Here are you and the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, answering the same question.
Do you think this is vindication?
It is. I mean, the FBI's had to wait 2 years while the president and his followers lied about the institution. Finally, the truth gets told.
Does your report vindicate Mr. Comey?
It doesn't vindicate anyone at the FBI who touched this, including the leadership.
The IG says you should feel no vindication.
Well, maybe it turns upon how we understand the word. What I mean is that the FBI was accused of treason, of illegal spying, of tapping Mr. Trump's wires illegally, of opening an investigation without justification, of being a criminal conspiracy to defeat and then unseat a president. All of that was nonsense. I think it's really important that the Inspector General looked at that and that the American people, your viewers and all viewers, understand that's true. But he also found things that we were never accused of, which is real sloppiness. And that's concerning. As I've said all along, has to be focused on. If I were director, I'd be very concerned about it and diving into it.
Well, sloppiness may be a euphemism for what it is he found. One of his big concerns is the way the FBI handled the FISA applications and the warrants that allowed you to surveil Carter Page, who was a former foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign. Again, here is what you said about the FISA process and what the Inspector General Horowitz said this week. Take a look.
I have total confidence that the FISA process was followed and that the entire case was handled in a thoughtful, responsible way by DOJ and the FBI.
We identified significant inaccuracies and omissions in each of the 4 applications, 7 in the first application and a total of 17 by the final renewal application.
17 significant errors in the FISA process, and you say that it was handled in a thoughtful and appropriate way.
Yeah, he's right. I was wrong. I was overconfident in the procedures that the FBI and Justice had built over 20 years. I thought they were robust enough. It's incredibly hard to get a FISA. I was overconfident in those because he's right. There was real sloppiness. 17 things that either should have been in the applications or at least discussed and characterized differently. It was not acceptable. And so he's right. I was wrong.
But you make it sound like you're a bystander, an eyewitness. You were the director of the FBI while a lot of this was going on, sir.
Sure. I'm responsible for that. That's why I'm telling you I was wrong. I was overconfident as director in our procedures. And it's important that a leader be accountable and transparent. If I were still director, I'd be saying exactly the same thing that Chris Wray is saying, which is we are going to get to the bottom of this, because the most important question is it systemic? Are there problems in other cases?
One of the central issues is the role that the Steele dossier played, which was Oppo research paid for by the Democrats, what role it played in getting the FISA warrants to surveil Page. Again, here's your version, and again, here's the Inspector General.
My recollection was it was part of a broader mosaic of facts that were laid before the FISA judge to obtain a FISA warrant.
And we concluded that the Steele reporting played a central and essential role in the decision to seek a FISA order.
Horowitz says it wasn't part, as you told Brett Baer, it wasn't part of a broader mosaic. He said it played an essential role in establishing probable cause. In fact, he says if it hadn't been for the Steele dossier, the FBI probably wouldn't have even submitted a FISA application that had been reviewed in April of 2016, or August rather of 2016. They decided not to do it. They get the Steele dossier, they do it. It wasn't part of a broader mosaic. That's what you.
So the reason that majority of that wasn't discussed in this, tale is because the tale here involved Comey's memos and Benjamin Wittes, and Benjamin Wittes is playing, propagandist on the side. He's connecting dots for people using his newly found attention. And Comey is, of course, on the other side, also, trying to promote the respectability of the FBI the entire time, saying everything was done by the book, and the book is great. The book is perfect. And oh gosh, you don't understand how thorough and careful we are, only to have it all crumble after the Inspector General and Mueller Mueller finds nothing, and the Inspector General goes, this was terrible. Comey, of course, retreats to, it was just sloppy. Now, I want to remind you of the quote that I had from Comey. I explained that he could count on me to always tell him the truth. I said, I don't do sneaky things, I don't leak, and I don't do weasel moves. And I want to give you, as a closing for that, one of Comey's final weasel moves, which was an interview with George Stephanopoulos.
Did you believe his denial?
Honestly, never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but I don't know whether the current president of the United States was with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow in 2013. It's possible, but I don't know.
So if you follow my chain here, all of the memos have Trump caring a lot about this fucking B-tape and it not being true. So Comey has to wiggle that out there going, I can't say it's not true. It might be true. Oh, that's a weasel move right there.
You think? I mean, this is just to bring it a little bit back, but just to connect it to the whole thing, right? The people right now are screaming about the absence of decorum and the absence of sort of doing things by proper channels and yada, yada, yada. You had the head of the FBI sort of implicating the president of the United States in one of the most gross scandals of ever, if should such a thing had happened, on television, knowing specifically that the president cares about this and has provided him with evidence against it happening. Okay. And all of these same people were cheering that on. And now they're oh, but how dare, how can, whatever has happened so far with Doge or whatever, even compare to deliberately sabotaging, your country. I don't know. This is if treason means anything, okay, it's not a wartime. Fine. I'm not talking about the criminal statute version of treason. I'm just talking about what it means to people. You're betraying your job, your duty, whatever it is that you're claiming to be doing, or the person you're working for. You know what? I think the president should appoint himself as an honorary FBI agent, so that he can actually go after people for lying to the FBI.
Well, so this is well. Here's the icing on this cake. So the Bulwark had a podcast yesterday with Ezra Klein, and they were discussing the FBI. And this is going to tie a nice bow, Alex. Tell me if you can hear the little bow.
You can't just say the Bulwark, Ezra Klein, just as if it's people.
The FBI, there's a new memo to the workforce last night. Acting FBI Director Brian Driscoll disclosed he'd been ordered by Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove to turn over the names of all FBI employees who worked on the January 6 cases. Driscoll could be removed as acting director at any point, and also fired from the Bureau. He's not eligible for government pension. Bove laid the groundwork for doing so by calling Driscoll insubordinate in a memo. So, I mean, the cash hearing is now next Thursday, or the cash vote, rather. But this feels inevitable that we have a night of the long knives coming for the FBI here in the next couple of weeks.
So I was just doing a show that's partially about this. Have you guys talked about the weird story of Driscoll yet? The Driz?
I mean, a little bit on the surface, but I'm confused.
This guy was
by
not.
It, to be honest.
So Chris Wray, former Trump appointee running the FBI, resigns, even though his term was not up, because Trump is going to fire him. So they need an acting director of the FBI. They appear to make a mistake on the website because they're a bunch of fools. And they put the wrong guy's name, this being Driscoll. And because it would be embarrassing to say, we put the wrong guy's name as acting director of the FBI on the website, now Driscoll, who was not supposed to be the acting director of the FBI, is director, and they think to themselves, it's only going to be a little while anyway. Then...
Okay, maybe I'm coming around to your position on the rakes.
Because Driscoll is like not a soulless careerist who they have like chosen for this role. He goes like to the FBI quite directly and says, we are in the fight of our lives. We are not going to let them destroy this agency. I'm paraphrasing the emails he sent out. And
we have talked
now,
about those emails. Yeah.
It now becomes like a sort of meme inside the FBI, and he's got, sort of like, he looks like he just walked out of a saloon. He's like an amazing looking guy. He will be fired, I expect. But one thing that's happened, Benjamin Wittes you always know things are bad when you're reading Lawfare again, right? The website, like that's when things are bad.
We love Wittes. I guess we had a period of time when we had Wittes Wednesdays on here. It might be time to
that's when threat levels were.
So that ties the whole nice bow. Just yesterday, that podcast comes out, and boom, they're giving me my closure to basically prove, since we can't go back in time and relive it, that all these fuckers were hanging on to everything Benjamin Wittes said during that time period.
By the way, just to give you the real bow on this, and it's forward facing, Wittes. So I've listened to a few hours of his podcast just because I'm just fascinated with the guy, not even knowing all this. He's looking for some kind of, and this is what he called it, a DDoS on the government that a lot of people can do, that is sort of individually legal, right? That they can all like trigger some action, like sending some kind of a letter or whatever, but like something that will like take resources, deliberately to gum up the works, right? And he wants it to be viral so that, millions of people do it. That's what he's looking for right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just FYI, right? This is the level of operation we're talking about. Like, he's like, can 50 million, he's actually trying to find he calls it he analogizes it to the ice bucket challenge, like a thing that somebody can do that will take some resources away from the government that can go viral, and if enough people do it, it'll create like disruption. And I guess my punchline with all of this, I sure hope that some of these people get taken down specifically for disrupting an official proceeding.
That would be poetic.
Yeah. If people don't know, disrupting an official proceeding is a crime defined in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act that was passed to never have another Enron again. Because what happened at Enron is that their auditors, Arthur Andersen, were shredding their files in order to avoid being caught, doing whatever it is they were doing and enabling Enron to do whatever they were doing. So basically they said, look, if you get in the way of us like auditing or like something like that, but like, prevent something from going on, that's, they called that disrupting an official proceeding. So, and it had jail time and whatever. And that was the law that was picked up to go after so many of the J6 protesters because they were quote unquote disrupting an official proceeding, though it's like they didn't stop anything from happening. They delayed it, but like you can sort of tell the difference between whatever there's like a riot. Take the worst interpretation, right? There was like some kind of a riot. People went in, they delayed it by a few hours. Like that's very different from we destroyed the information that would be required to conclude this investigation.
Right.
Disrupt in that sense. It's much more likely to using BleachBit, say, on a server.
Right.
Anyway, so but since now we are interpreting that to mean getting in the way of the government doing whatever it wants to do, right, is disrupting an official proceeding. I don't know, man. Like it's all getting so very retarded at this point. It's basically like you're incompetent. Wait, not that competent, right? Like it's like they want you to just be on that sweet spot where they can play their part of the game and just kind of slow you down. And you get a few wins, and they get a few wins, and 4 years later, I don't know, Kamala runs again or something like it. But unfortunately, the game has completely changed, and I suspect it'll take them a while before they recover.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a lot of chaos. If this is going to be a good time for people if they want to comment or offer opinions on anything that we've discussed today, anything you think we've missed, or you'd like us to give our opinions on, or anything, go ahead and request, because we're hitting the end here. Jacob, you've been up for a while. Do you have any thoughts on the second half here?
I have a question for you guys still. What do you think is the percentage chance that the Doge team is going to find something that, like, obvious problems that any computer programmer should have caught years ago, that all our social security numbers are, sitting in the equivalent of a file cabinet somewhere?
I would put that, if you're talking about that existing somewhere, I would put the probability high, although the location may not be where the largest amount of vulnerable data would be. So I would almost guarantee you that we would find an instance of that. Horrible, atrocious security protocols or something like that, but not necessarily like, the FBI, you could just go to their website and go to one route, and look, you could just download everybody's taxes. Like something like that probably is unlikely.
I suspect that they've probably found multiple already, if I had to guess. And I say this just it's so hard to convey this intuition to people, but like, I have worked with code bases that were loved by coders that worked on them, but they were, it took a few years for the whole code base we were working on to come to something. And, by the time you get to the end, the earliest parts are just the earliest parts, and there's like the ugly corners and whatever. And I was freaking out about the security implications of what we were doing. And again, it was like very competent people, very carefully, very thoughtfully thinking through everything they were doing and code reviewing everything, yada, yada. A system like that goes from the days of COBOL, I don't know. I put extremely high probability that they've already found multiple critical vulnerabilities that would expose data. If they haven't even found traces of compromise.
There's going to be several differences. There's going to be vulnerabilities that would be internal, meaning that someone who is unauthorized to access something could access a treasure trove of information. And then there's the ones that are exposed to the broader internet. Now, the broader internet, you have somewhat additional protection to, not because the federal government's necessarily good, but because that attack surface has already been attempted to be penetrated by hostile actors day in and day out. And of course, bored white hats. So that attack surface has been scanned a whole bunch, leaving few places for there to be significant holes. Now, that being said, there's always new holes anytime someone does something new. One story I like was an FBI portal where you would submit information as like a tip line, and you'd put in your email address, and you'd get an email, saying that your tip had been submitted from the official FBI email account. And the hacker in question, I don't remember his name or even his moniker, but he had figured out that if you could change the contents of the email, because the contents of the email were unfortunately encoded inside of the web page itself. So you could submit, quote, a tip, but you could have the return message be whatever you wanted. You could put someone else's email in there and change the return message, even though this was supposed to be a tip line. And the recipient would get an official FBI email sent from the FBI's servers. So everything the recipient would get of this email would check out. It came from the FBI servers. It's an official FBI.gov email address, etc. And you could say whatever you wanted. So this person, I think their usage was only for shits and giggles, but they did this. They they were sending people emails from the FBI, with whatever they wanted to as the email subject. So there's threats like that can pop up anytime a new web page or a new feature exists that maybe not is access to treasure troves of data, but can still have consequences.
But I mean, even that can be escalated into access for treasure troves of data, right? Like if you have that ability, you can then send this to some employee and say, go to this form and enter your password or whatever.
Yes.
Boom.
Yes.
Now you've got the Secretary of Treasury's master password into everything. It's again the kind of system that allows that kind of form to exist. It's just NGMI. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, yes. Well, that's the nephew who knew how to use Microsoft Access and could code in VB6. Yeah, they made the vital components for the entire department.
I don't know. I think again, this is why I'm telling people I'm sort of like putting out a broadcast that like people should be very, very careful with like taking strong anti-Doge positions right now, because these people are going to unearth unbelievable things. I don't know. I would bet very good money that things are going to come out that. I mean, we're already honestly. I think we're already shocked at what has sort of been emerging, but like. They've literally just started, and they're working, I don't know, 100-hour weeks. So I don't know what it is that they're gonna find, but this kind of audit on this kind of government, I mean, it's just it's kind of at their mercy. Like honestly, that they will find unbelievably embarrassing things is mathematically certain. The only question is like how much of that are they going to publicize, how are they going to use that, or whatever, or what exactly are they going to find?
Well, this is the surprising thing for me, because Ezra Klein has been basically going for the past week, going on podcasts, including the one like on Bulwark, saying, let them cook. They're going to break something. They're going to own it. And we'll catch them on that. Stop trying to react to anything they're saying. And my whole thing is, are you kidding me? Yeah.
I mean, all of their options are pretty poor at the moment. They don't have many legal ways that they can actually win. So if they're going to call anything a success, it's in them, expanding their email databases, right? Having new organizations that are created in the wake of the old ones decaying, and trying to get new people who are currently motivated to resist in any way possible. It's not going to be as many people as in 2016 or during that era, but there's still money to be had. And so if you can if you have futile endeavors, but you can curate a decent, newsletter, let's say, then you have accumulated a little bit of power for the future game, at least from your standpoint. Whether or not you actually win nationally doesn't necessarily matter if you're attempting to establish yourself for the future, politically speaking, position yourself. So, I mean, I don't have any optimism for their chances to really succeed in their endeavors to thwart this in any way other than assassination or something like that. But there is still gains individuals could have in that environment.
I've been following the court cases pretty closely, including on Lawfare blog, which does come from the Brookings Institution. And the TRO that came out Saturday morning from in Manhattan,
temporary restraining order for those.
Yeah, wow. It was ex parte, meaning they didn't even notify the government, the federal government, that they were filing it. And it's like, are you kidding me?
So can you elaborate on that for people who might not understand the consequences?
So when you file an emergency order with a court, you usually, the general thing is you have to give notice to the other people that you're filing. Now, what they did is, this is, I forget how many states, including New York, California, Wisconsin, Minnesota, right? They filed on a Friday night in Manhattan, probably because they knew who the emergency judge was, because there's always a judge on call, and they asked for what's called an ex parte order, which means that, hey, this is enough of an emergency. So, for example, let's say somebody is the victim of domestic violence, and they go to the judge and they say, I need a restraining order to protect me against my husband or whatever, but please give it to me now, even before the other person has a chance to plead their case in front of the court. The judge in Manhattan, and this guy was I believe a Clinton appointee, or I believe a Clinton appointee. He enjoined every political appointee in the entire Treasury Department from having access to the payment information of the Treasury Department, which apparently includes the Secretary of Treasury, without even giving the U.S. government a chance to plead its case and respond or anything.
So that's probably going to be overturned in due time.
Oh, well, yeah, but again, it's all about coming up the works, right? If you start getting, a hailstorm of these things coming out of every deep blue court, every 3 days, that's kind of what a DDoS looks like. But I will say, I looked at this last night, and in the beginning, I was like, "Oh, come the fuck on! This didn't happen." And then I looked at the order that came out, and it's written in a very confusing way. But fucking hell, this is exactly correct. No, it blocked every political appointee. So basically what we're talking about here is that the judicial branch is stepping into the executive and saying the people that have been appointed by the president and confirmed by Congress cannot access information of the executive branch.
Well, what? I'll tell you one mistake I think Elon made, which is complaining about this order on X, because look, until they give you notice that this order has been issued, you're not bound by anything until there's some sort of notice, right? Somebody went into court in Manhattan and got an ex parte notice that I have nobody served me with. That doesn't require me to do anything. And I just think, Elon, it would have been better off if they had just ignored it until at the very least they got served with it.
We don't know that it didn't get served, right?
We don't know exactly. I mean, I've been trying to follow it, but once the order came out, I am sure that's when the attorney generals from all those states let the federal government know. But it's also the weekend, and Washington D.C. is snowed in, and the question becomes: okay, some lawyer in the solicitor's office gets an order which is addressed to the political appointees in the Treasury Department. That doesn't go to Elon Musk. That could go to the two people on Doge who are employees of Treasury. It goes to the Secretary of the Treasury, but Elon Musk and the rest of the people, why are they supposed to be served with this order, which supposedly doesn't involve them at all?
I think there is a messaging philosophy here, right? I think it probably serves them to publicize that this has happened and how it's happened, and just to raise us think and make it difficult for any other judge to keep doing this. And just really make it stigmatized behavior rather than trying to work within the system, even if it costs them like, a few hours or whatever.
Okay.
It even instructs whoever, like if the Treasury Secretary I don't even know if the judge can even say this, but so the Treasury Secretary has to delete basically all of these people, which include the Treasury Secretary, have to delete all information that they do have already, right? Not only are they not allowed to be given access, but if they had been given access and they have gotten access to any information, they have to delete it.
Okay, let me give you a little trick for finding out what the most exciting things happening at the Supreme Court is actually happening. Look at the dissents from the grants of certiorari. So a grant of certiorari means that the Supreme Court is willing to hear a case. Now, when judges write a dissent, they are saying, no, I think we should have, or we should not take the case. Justice Thomas, for a long time, has been, and you have to realize, Justice Thomas has a whole army of former clerks who are now district and appellate court judges. And what he's been doing is he's been writing these dissents from denial of certiorari, which basically tell his army and any lawyer out there looking for the type of cases that he's hoping to get set up. And back in the first Trump administration, there were a lot of these nationwide injunctions that district courts were setting, so any judge anywhere in the entire country could decide to enjoin the entirety of the federal government. And there were cases trying to come up to the Supreme Court saying that this shouldn't be allowed. And there were rejections of certiorari by the Supreme Court, which Justice Thomas, I read several, I at least one, a dissent from one of these, where he basically lays out his entire thing of, no, we have to set limits as a Supreme Court on these types of injunctions. So they might be just setting up the ball for the Supreme Court to spike it.
Yeah, no, I can totally imagine that. In general, I think we don't appreciate the degree to which the war. This is an info war. This is not being fought over bureaucratic email. This is not being fought over. Whatever. I mean, all the things that Gator described, right, about Russiagate and about Flynn and whatever, all of that was fought over the airwaves. It was about what people thought, and that had real implications for real people ending up in prison or outside of prison or whatever. But first and foremost, the flag everybody needs to capture is perception. And this is why I think, I don't know if Musk is doing it for this reason or for some other reason, or because he has some, a set of principles he's working with that wash out to the same thing as I'm saying here, but in a more complicated way. But at the end of the day, I think this whole thing is going to be fought over tweets, pretty much. And it's wild. And thank you. This was, by the way, this was extremely enlightening. And if you feel like continuing to drop by our spaces and give us updates on this stuff, you're most welcome. This is, I think, basically, look, I have been preparing for a deluge. Deluge
is the usual pronunciation.
Sorry, this is one of those words that I have written a few times that never pronounced, and
the luggy.
It always jumps. You think you know what it's saying, but then you're like, wait. Anyway, of information, and I have been surprised because the information is coming up at 10x, and I think what we need and what we want the space to be basically is a place where we're operating at a weekly cadence, so it's not like a quick reaction to what happened 2 hours ago. Most of the time, sometimes it is, but it's like the place where we kind of slow down a little bit and catch up to what the fuck is going on.
Well,
just
I only
so we
got
can
through like 20% of the articles that I had curated this week. So
hey, that's pretty high historically speaking.
We're not doing a great job. But yeah, I agree with you, Alex.
Yeah. So thanks for your contribution so far.
Well, everybody, the big game, the football finale is starting to air. So if you want to get on to that, I suggest you have, because we're going to be closing up this space. Thank you for sticking with us. I would appreciate. Go ahead.
One parting thing is, if people want to tell us if the new timing is better than the old one, and we have no obligation to take their feedback to heart, but we will read it.
Yeah, and if you have other feedback
or other feedback, any other feedback,
because I'm assuming everyone is enjoying things, but silence sometimes is not necessarily as interpretable. I'm seeing a lot of regulars in the listening audience here. We don't get so many people requesting to speak, but you're sticking around, so I have to assume that you're enjoying things. But still, some feedback would be great if you want to leave us some. So that either we can improve or stay the same. All right, everybody. I hope you have a great evening, and let's see if we can keep pace with the news for the next week.
Are you supportive of these onesies?